Chapter 340. This time, Su Peijian was accompanying Luo Meishan and Song Yoha, so all the itinerary was arranged by them. When they arrived at the hot spring hotel, Su Peijian finally smiled. I've been to this hot spring hotel before. The environment isn't bad. Su Peijian glanced at Qiu Junjiu. This trip had nothing to do with Qiu Junjiu, but for some reason when she heard that they were going to Japan she asked to come along. In order to wait for her they even set off a day later. However, when he stepped out of the house he realized that Qiu Junjiu had been daydreaming for some reason. Junjiao, what's wrong? Although it was impossible for Su Peijian and Qiu Yanbo to be together, she and Qiu Junjiu had been friends for many years. She showed concern on her face. Nothing. Qiu Junjiu was a little annoyed. She was really frightened by Hu Jinyao that day. She didn't recover for 2 or 3 days. The feeling of being so close to the Grim Reaper and thinking that he was really going to die was really terrible. She had suffered such a big loss, but she couldn't do anything to Hu Jinyao. Even Qiu Yanbo had told her not to go against Su Qingsang. Listen to this, is this what a brother is saying to his sister? Wasn't it just for a project? Hu Jinyao could give the project to someone else for Su Qingsang's sake. Why did Qiu Yanbo only ask her to endure? If there's nothing else, let's go back to the room. Put your luggage down. You can take your time to read the rest. Su Peijian's patience had never been very good. This group of people would travel with a lot of luggage. In the past, people would help her with these things, but this time because a few of her friends came out together she had to do it herself. The others didn't have any objections. After completing the procedures they returned to their rooms to rest. The hot spring hotel only had 2 floors. There were not many rooms, but each and every one of them was very elegant. Su Qingsang and Xiang Saiping's room was on the 2nd floor. From there they could see a small garden at the back. Behind the garden was the hot spring. Every hot spring pool was surrounded and divided into 2 areas for men and women. Mom, do you want to rest for a while? If you don't want to rest, we'll go down to eat. We'll soak in the hot spring tonight. There's no need to rest. We've been in the car for so long this afternoon. You should be hungry. Let's go eat something then come back for the hot spring. Yeah. Su Qingsang nodded. Japan was not a big place. Although it was a long drive, it was actually not tiring. The 2 of them casually packed up their things and went downstairs. At the same time, Su Peijian and the others had returned to their respective rooms. Su Qingsang and Xiang Kaiping went to have dinner together. Then they went to the hot spring pool that they had booked beforehand. The surroundings were so quiet that Su Qingsang could only hear the sound of their movements in the small pool. Xiang Kaiping looked at Su Qingsang. Ever since she came she had felt that Su Qingsang was too thin. Now that the mother and daughter were soaking in the hot spring with so little clothes on, they realized that their daughter wasn't skinny at all. She had all the places that were supposed to have flesh and she actually looked very voluptuous. Fortunately it wasn't like her. She had the typical petite figure of a southern woman. She was a little thin and not voluptuous. Mom, what are you looking at? Su Qingsang turned around and found that Xiang Kaiping had been staring at her. Even though she was her own mother she still felt shy being stared at like that. Chapter 341. Yes. Su Qingsang glanced at her phone. She hadn't received Hu Jinyao's call today. Maybe he's busy. Xiang Kaiping had learned a little about Hu Jinyao's identity. He was indeed very busy. He often had to work overtime, socialize and deal with a lot of things. Speaking of which, you've been married for half a year, right? Do you plan to have children? Xiang Kaiping didn't think that having children would make a marriage stronger. But Su Qingsang was over 25 years old. At this age it was the best time to have a child. No. Su Qingsang shook her head. Her smile was a little unnatural. It's still early. There's no rush. Ever since Hu Jinyao found out that she was taking birth control pills, he had been taking precautions. That was the tacit understanding between them. They both felt that it wasn't a good time to have children. Since that was the case they would have children later. Seeing her like that, Xiang Kaiping suddenly thought of a possibility. Qingsang, you don't want children because of my relationship with your father, do you? Of course not. Su Qingsang denied without thinking. I just feel that I'm still young and don't want to have children so soon. Xiang Kaiping glanced at her and didn't say anything, but she knew that Su Qingsang wasn't telling the truth. She must have done it because of her, because Su Qingsang felt that she was an illegitimate daughter. Her biological father treated her like that, and she, as a mother, wasn't by her side before. Xiang Kaiping felt a little sad. She didn't know where to start. She lowered her head and covered the tears in her eyes with the heat of the hot spring. Su Qingsang didn't know if Xiang Kaiping believed her. She wanted to explain more, but Xiang Kaiping already looked up at her with a faint smile. This hot spring is quite comfortable. Didn't the waiter say there was scented tea? I want to have a drink. Do you want one? Let me get it. Su Qingsang got up to serve Xiang Kaiping the scented tea as she spoke. Seeing that Xiang Kaiping believed her, she didn't mention it for a while. Although it was comfortable to soak in the hot spring, they couldn't stay in it forever. Xiang Kaiping was used to going to bed early, so they got up early and went back to their room to rest. Not long after they returned to their room, Su Peixian and the others left their room to soak in the hot spring. Xiang Kaiping went to bed early, but Su Qingsang couldn't fall asleep. In the past 2 days, Hu Jinyao would call her every day, but today so much time had passed and Hu Jinyao hadn't contacted her. Su Qingsang turned over and found that it was almost 11 o'clock at night. If Hu Jinyao didn't call, she would go to bed. As soon as she thought that, her phone screen lit up. Looking at Hu Jinyao's name on the screen, Su Qingsang quickly turned off the volume. She turned around and found that Xiang Kaiping was still asleep. She quickly got up and went to the bathroom with her phone. You picked up the phone so quickly? What? Didn't you sleep? I was just about to sleep. Su Qingsang's voice unconsciously softened. What about you? Why are you so late? I'm working overtime. In fact, Hu Jinyao had said that he would go to Japan, but after he returned to Rome City he was entangled with a lot of things. He was still working overtime in the company. I wanted to come to Japan to look for you, but I might not be able to come so soon. It's okay, I'm having a good time with my mom. If you're going to work, you don't have to come. We'll come back on our own in a few days. Su Qingsang could understand that work was more important. But she was more or less disappointed. Chapter 342. Hu Jinyao really didn't have time these days, not only because of the company's business. Hu Yifan and Hu Yiyang had been restless during this period. He wasn't afraid of them, but Hu Mingguang liked those 2 nephews and always gave them opportunities again and again. Then have fun. Go where and what you want to do. Talk to that girl directly. I know I will. Su Qingsang heard that Hu Jinyao sounded a little tired. Are you very tired? I think your voice is a little hoarse. You have to rest. Don't tire yourself out. Thank you for your concern, wife. I will. Hu Jinyao looked at the time as he spoke. It was exactly 11 o'clock. He suddenly said, Happy New Year. What? Tomorrow is New Year's Day. Japan is an hour earlier than China. So it should be New Year's Day now. Happy New Year. Su Qingsang was stunned. It was so quiet here that she had forgotten. Today was the last day of the year. Happy New Year to you too. Hu Jinyao seemed to be very satisfied. I should be the first person to say hello to you in the new year, right? Yes. Su Qingsang nodded. Do you want me to call you at 12 and be the first person to say hello to you? No need. Go to bed early. Otherwise, how can you have the energy to play tomorrow? He was always so considerate. Su Qingsang really felt warm in her heart. Hu Jinyao saw Yang Wenchong come in with a document with a serious expression. He made a gesture and spoke to Su Qingsang on the other end of the phone in a very low voice. It's getting late. You should rest. Okay. You too. After hanging up, the gentleness on Hu Jinyao's face completely disappeared. He stared at Yang Wenchong with burning eyes. How's the investigation going? Is there any result? Yang Wenchong took a few steps forward and put the document in front of Hu Jinyao. President Hua, I've already checked, but there seems to be some discrepancy. What discrepancy? Take a look first. You'll know after reading it. Hu Jinyao took the document from his hand. After casually flipping through a few pages, his eyes suddenly became sharp. President Hua. Yang Wenchong was a little nervous by his expression. Hu Jinyao waved his hand and said, Go do something for me. Yang Wenchong listened to his instructions, nodded, then turned around and left. Hu Jinyao turned around and looked at the night sky outside the window. His eyes were deep. Su Qingsang went to bed soon after receiving Hu Jinyao's call. Early in the morning, she followed Xiang Kaiping out to eat the specialty noodles of a nearby noodle restaurant. After they finished eating, They listened to the tour guide introduce the fun places nearby. Su Qingsang nodded. Just as she was about to get into the car, she remembered that she had forgotten to bring her phone. I'm going back to get my phone. Su Qingsang glanced at her companions and Xiang Kai-ping. Wait for me here. I'll be down soon. Do you want me to accompany you? I can go get it for you. Mom, I'm not a kid. I'm crossing a road with a cell phone. Wait for me, I'll be there soon. Su Qingsang hurriedly ran into the hotel room to get her phone. When she came out, she was in a hurry. She closed the door and walked downstairs. At the same time, someone just turned the corner and walked in her direction. The person's footsteps were not fast, but Su Qingsang's were. As a result, they bumped into each other. Su Qingsang took 2 steps back. Before she could steady herself, she heard a somewhat unhappy female voice. Chapter 343. Do you know how to walk? The sharp voice spoke in Japanese. Su Qingsang didn't understand the first sentence. Her English was good, but she had never learned Japanese. She couldn't understand the language, so she instinctively apologized in English. When he raised his head, he saw an extremely familiar face. It's you. Qiu Junjiu thought of Hua Jinyao's murderous expression the other day when she saw Su Qingsang. She had never been humiliated like that, nor had she been frightened like that. And all of this was brought to her by Su Qingsang. Qiu Junjiu had planned to let it go and not bring it up again. She didn't expect to meet Su Qingsang here, which reminded her of old and new grudges. His eyes swept over Su Qingsang. Because she was going out to play, Su Qingsang was wearing very casual clothes. She was wearing sneakers and jeans and a red sweater. The outfit made Su Qingsang look 2 or 3 years younger than usual. He looked like a fresh graduate of a university. Qiu Junjiu narrowed her eyes. She looked at Su Qingsang with displeasure and jealousy. Su Qingsang didn't expect to meet this group of people in Japan. They were all here today. Su Peixian, Qiu Junjiu, Luo Meishan and Song Yoha. He saw them and they saw her. The air seemed to freeze for a moment. Su Qingsang blinked and looked at Su Peixian, who was walking behind Qiu Junjiu. She nodded slightly as a greeting. After greeting them, she thought that Xiang Kai-ping was still waiting for her, so she prepared to leave. Stop, Qiu Junjiu suddenly called out to Su Qingsang. Su Qingsang stopped and looked at Qiu Junjiu. Qiu Junjiu was looking at her too with obvious displeasure in her eyes. Su Qingsang felt that her life hadn't changed, but it was hard for the others to get used to the change in her identity. What goes around comes around. This woman, who was once looked down upon and ignored by this group of people, who was almost like a weed, was now suddenly above them. Even if Su Qingsang didn't do anything, the change in her identity was enough to make Qiu Junjiu and the others uncomfortable. Is there anything else? Su Qingsang was in a hurry to find Xiang Kai-ping. It was New Year's Day, the first day of the year. She was afraid that there would be too many people going to other places if she was late. Yes. When Qiu Junjiu saw Su Qingsang, she thought of herself being strangled by Hua Jinyao. You bumped into me. Shouldn't you apologize? Su Qingsang was too lazy to tell her that she had already said sorry. Said he nodded. Sorry, I didn't pay attention to the road. She spoke with sincerity, but Qiu Junjiu only felt that she was being careless. Yes. He wasn't paying attention to where he was going. Now your position is different. If you can walk sideways, how can you see the road with your nostrils facing up? Su Qingsang's brows furrowed slightly when she heard what he said. He moved his lips and was about to retort when he remembered that Xiang Kai-ping was still waiting for him. He raised his eyebrows slightly. Are you done? Can I go now? Qiu Junjiu was angered by Su Qingsang's indifferent attitude. Su Qingsang, what are you so proud of? What are you so proud of? How could she be so smug? Su Qingsang didn't understand. Looking at the situation in front of him, he didn't want to waste any more time. Chapter 344. Illegitimate daughter? Su Qingsang raised her eyebrows slightly. Yes. I'm just an illegitimate daughter. Are you done? Fior, please make way. I'm not done. Qiu Junjiu blocked her way. Can't I? Su Qingsang had wanted to just leave. But looking at the situation in front of her, she couldn't leave right away. Her gaze fell on the 4 women in front of her. The corridor was only so big. With them blocking the corridor, she couldn't leave even if she wanted to. Su Qingsang looked at Qiu Junjiu impolitely. I'm busy now. I don't have time to listen to you. You said that I bumped into you and I apologized. You're not hurt, so I can't think of any reason for me to stand here and listen to you. Chio Junjio blinked. Her usually arrogant face changed several times. She couldn't believe that Su Qingsang dared to argue with her so directly. Sorry, please make way. Ignoring the four women blocking her way, Su Qingsang walked past them and went outside. Chio Junjio was furious. Su Peijian, who had been silent all this time, grabbed Su Qingsang's arm when she walked past her. Su Qingsang stopped and turned to look at her. Chio Junjio was also looking at her. Their eyes met. Su Qingsang raised her eyebrows inquiringly, but Su Peijian was unhappy. Su Qingsang, I really can't tell that you're like this when you're in power. You disguised yourself so well when you were in the Su family. So well that Su Peijian couldn't tell that Su Qingsang was a fox with sharp claws, not an innocent little rabbit. You're wrong. I'm not pretending. I'm not in power now. Growing up in that kind of environment, if she still wanted to be high profile, it would be even more difficult for her. He understood. She tried to pull her hand out, but Su Peijian held it tightly, which made her frown uncomfortably. Isn't it in power to marry Hu Jinyao? What does it mean to be in power? Su Qingsang, you weren't like this in the past. Su Peijian squeezed Su Qingsang's arm slightly, not letting her break free. Do you know what you were like in the past? As she spoke, Su Peijian moved closer to Su Qingsang's face. I think you're too arrogant and proud now. Have you forgotten how pitiful you used to be? Su Peijian. Let me go. Su Qingsang's other hand clenched, trying to restrain herself. I'll let you go. I just wanted to remind you. No matter how arrogant you are, how proud you are, how cocky you are, you can't hide the fact that you have. You can't hide the fact that you've never been loved or cared for since you were young. You're a pitiful worm. Are you done? Su Qingsang's expression changed slightly. If you're done, then let me go. I'm not done. The calmer Su Qingsang was, the angrier Su Peijian became. Su Pehen more. Su Qingsang. Why could Su Qingsang marry Hu Jinyao and make Qiu Yanba miss her so much? If Su Qingsang hadn't married Hu Jinyao, if she had still been a pitiful illegitimate daughter that no one cared about, why would Qiu Yanba even spare a glance at her? Do you remember? You cried and called me mom. You wanted to call her mom too. But my mom ignored you. What happened to you? You were crying in your room, weren't you? Right? Chapter 345. Ever since I was young. You could only watch Yusin and I enjoy motherly and fatherly love. What about you? What about you? Have you forgotten that your mother didn't want you and abandoned you? My father didn't like you and didn't want you. If my mother didn't pity you, you would have been thrown out of the Su family. If I had kept you in the Su family, you would have been thrown out long ago and died in some corner of the world. Why are you being so arrogant in front of us? Chio Junjio finally heaved a sigh of relief. Luo Maishan and Song Yoha watched the scene in front of them without saying a word. However, the three of them had the same satisfaction in their eyes. They were watching a good show. Su Peijian. Su Qingsang didn't care about the others. Her eyes, which had always been clear and indifferent, were cold at this time. Are you done? Not enough. Su Peijian had been holding back her anger. She just wanted to vent it. Let me tell you, you are not only an illegitimate daughter. Your mother is a mistress. No matter how arrogant you are, you can't hide the fact that your mother is a mistress. Su Qingsang took a deep breath and raised her hand to slap Su Peijian's face. However, a hand was faster than her. The slap not only shocked Su Peijian and the others, but also Su Qingsang. Her hand hadn't fallen yet. She turned around and found Xiang Kaiping was there. She didn't know how long she had been listening, but her face was red. Her hand was still in the air and her breathing was heavy. Her wrinkled eyes stared at Su Peijian with hatred. Although she wasn't young, she had suffered a lot. The slap was hurried, fast and hard. Su Peijian didn't have time to react before she was hit. There was an obvious five-finger mark on her face. Su Peijian was dumbfounded by the immense pain on her face. She stared at the woman who had appeared out of nowhere. You, who do you think you are? How dare you hit me? She had focused all her attention on Su Qingsang last time and had only glanced at Xiang Kaiping. She felt that she looked familiar but couldn't remember. Luo Maishan and Song Yoha remembered. Wasn't this woman the one who tried on clothes with Su Qingsang last time? Xiang Kaiping was a little anxious when she didn't see Su Qingsang. Although they were in the hotel, it was impossible for anything to happen. However, as a mother who had been separated from her daughter for many years, she couldn't help but feel worried. Therefore, after waiting for a few minutes and not seeing Su Qingsang, she informed her companion and came up to look for Su Qingsang. However, she didn't expect to hear Su Peijian's voice before she went upstairs. Every word she said was like a needle that pierced Xiang Caiping's heart. Her heart ached so much that she couldn't breathe. Unbeknownst to her, her daughter had been ignored by her biological father and looked down upon by her half-sister. Being put in a difficult position by his biological father's spouse. She had been hiding in Rong City all this time. She had always thought that Su Qinghui would take good care of her daughter and treat her daughter well. How big of a mistake had she made? The self-blame that she had already suppressed crushed her once again. She felt that she was unforgivable. She even felt that no matter what she did in this life, she would never be able to make it up to Su Qingsang. Her mind was full of thoughts about what she would do in the future and how to make it up to Su Qingsang. She heard Su Peijian say that she was a mistress. Chapter 346. Xiang Kaiping had slapped Su Peijian very hard. He still felt that it was not enough. Who do you think you are? Xiang Kaiping was not as gentlemanly as Su Qingsang. She grabbed Su Peijian without thinking. Her eyes were unprecedentedly gloomy. Who do you think you are? What right do you have to scold my daughter? What happened to your upbringing? Is this what your parents taught you? You. Su Peijian's face was still hurting. She couldn't even cover her face when Xiang Kaiping grabbed her. She just looked at the woman and understood the meaning behind her words. Her daughter? Who? Su Qingsang? How did Su Qingsang become her daughter? Before Su Peijian could think it through, Xiang Kaiping couldn't bear it anymore. She couldn't let it go. The emotions that had been stuck in her heart for so many years seemed to have an outlet. She grabbed Su Peijian's hand and didn't let her break free. Who are you calling a mistress? Who do you think is a mistress? Let me tell you. I'm not a mistress. The mistress is your mother. Your mother, Li Qianxue, is the mistress. He stole my man. She shamelessly set up your father and had sex with him. That's how they got married. Su Peijian had never heard of this. She widened her eyes and looked at Xiang Kaiping in shock. You're talking nonsense. I'm talking nonsense? You can go home and ask Li Qianxue. Who is the mistress? Who shamelessly stole someone else's man? Xiang Kaiping shook off Su Peijian's hand and took a deep breath. She turned to Su Qingsang. Qingsang, are you okay? Su Qingsang shook her head gently. Mom, I'm fine. She stepped forward to help Xiang Kaiping. Her eyes were complicated. She was very happy that Xiang Kaiping was standing up for her. However, she was a little worried. She had spent a lot of time to stop Xiang Kaiping from thinking about what had happened to her. After Su Peijian's antics, Xiang Caiping's self-blame and discomfort would probably not go away for a long time. Qiu Junjiu and the others were stunned by the scene in front of them. Everyone else looked at Xiang Kaiping and her daughter blankly. Even Qiu Junjiu, who was usually sharp-tongued, was shocked by this turn of events. Skid. Xiang Kaiping couldn't take this lying down. She turned around abruptly and glared at Su Peijian. Miss Su, I'm warning you. There are people who want Qingsang. She is my most precious daughter. In the future, please watch your words. If there is a next time, I won't be polite. After saying that, she took Su Qingsang's hand and was about to leave. Su Qingsang pulled her hand back, patted her shoulder and walked to Su Peijian. Qingsang. Firstly, I'm not arrogant. Whether it's in the past or now, I'm only doing what I think I can and can do. I say it I Su. Can I Jing. Si I Su Jiner. She si Su silly she you Su. You. I sincerely hope that we can mind our own business. It's better for you and for me, don't you think? After saying this, she held Xiang Caiping's hand and left. Chapter 347. She had always been pampered by Su Qinghui and Li Qianxue since she was a child. Except for the occasional annoyance with Su Qingsang, her life had always been smooth sailing. But recently she had kicked a steel plate because of Su Qingsang. Today she had been slapped hard in the face. And the person who had slapped her was Su Qingsang's mother? The mistress between her mother and her father? How could Su Peijian take this lying down? What shocked her even more was Xiang Caiping's nonsense. How dare she say that Li Qianxue was a mistress? How dare she? Ah! She had lost her usual arrogance and composure. The demeanor that Li Qianxue had carefully cultivated had disappeared without a trace. He just hated it. He hated it to the core. Peijin. Qiu Junjiu and the others looked at her worriedly. Are you okay? Su Peijin was panting. Her face was cold and she couldn't hear the voices of her friends behind her. Peijin. Qiu Junjiu called her again worriedly. Xiang Caiping had really gone too far today. How dare she hit her? I'm fine. Su Peijin's words were almost squeezed out from between her teeth. The others looked at each other and saw the worry in each other's eyes. Peijin, your face. Why don't we go back and apply some medicine? Su Peijin didn't refute. She kept adjusting her breathing and finally nodded coldly. Qiu Junjiu and the others followed her back to her room. Su Peijin's hands were tightly clasped together. Her eyes had never been so gloomy. Su Qingsang and Xiang Caiping were silent all the way until they got into the car. Seeing that both of them didn't look too good when they got into the car, Yumei was smart enough not to ask. Su Qingsang looked at Xiang Caiping's pale face and sighed softly. Mom, you didn't have to do this. Because Yumei was there, she spoke in Lin City's dialect. Xiang Caiping couldn't speak. She kept her head down. Her hand was clenched into a fist on her knee, and her other hand was placed on her chest, pressing it tightly. Su Qingsang knew that she was trying to control her emotions. She wanted to comfort her but didn't know where to start. In the end, she put her arms around her shoulders and said, Mom, I'm fine. It was true. It was all in the past. Those things have long passed. Xiang Caiping still didn't speak, but Su Qingsang saw tears fall from her eyes as she kept her head down. She felt a little helpless, a little sad and a little touched. Actually, Dad isn't as bad as she said. Su Qingsang knew that any explanation would be useless, but she still wanted to make her feel better. At least for all these years I haven't been cold or hungry. Although I can't ask for more, it's already much better than the children of ordinary families. Xiang Caiping still did not speak. She could not open her mouth. She was afraid that if she opened her mouth she would burst into tears. Su Qingsang blinked her eyes and finally picked a few relaxing things to tell her. Mom, look, we're going to play now. How can I have fun if you're like this? Xiang Caiping waved her hand. She needed some time to calm herself down. Su Qingsang knew that it was useless to persuade her, so she hugged her mother tightly and leaned her face on her shoulder. Mom, I'm really fine. This is good, really good. Chapter 348. Moreover, if it weren't for the Su family's cold treatment for so long, she wouldn't have achieved what she had today. 25 years old, a medical graduate student, planning to take the medical master's exam. She had been working hard since her internship in her third year. Now she was a talent valued by both the hospital and the department. Xiang Caiping stopped crying, but her breathing was still unstable. Her throat was choked. That kind of emotion couldn't be comforted by a few words from Su Qingsang. No matter how good Su Qingsang was now, it couldn't make up for Su Qinghui's neglect of her in the past. It also couldn't make her forget that he abandoned her with a clear conscience. She was the original sin. Yumi didn't quite understand what they were talking about. After thinking about it, she leaned over from the front seat and asked in a low voice, Qingsang, is your mother okay? She's fine. Su Qingsang shook her head and signaled for Yumi to stop asking. Yumi was a very famous escort in Japan. Not only did she know Chinese and English, but she was also very familiar with the customs and habits of many countries. Seeing Su Qingsang's look, she didn't continue asking. It took Xiang Caiping a few minutes to recover from that kind of emotion. However, it was still useless. She was still depressed and disappointed. Su Qingsang knew that she couldn't persuade her, so she didn't want to. However, she began to think about something else. This hot spring hotel was very famous, but she didn't expect to meet Su Peijin and the others. The conflict today was not within her expectations. Su Peijin probably didn't expect to meet her either. She didn't know if they would leave after that. If they didn't leave, it would be troublesome to meet them again. Maybe she should mention to Xiang Caiping and change to another hotel? With that thought, Su Qingsang began to ask Yumi if there were any other hotels nearby that were similar to this one. Yumi knew this place very well. She began to introduce them. Xiang Caiping, who had been depressed, suddenly raised her head at that moment. Why should we change hotels? We're not changing hotels. Mom. Why should we change hotels? They should be the ones changing hotels. After what happened just now, Xiang Kaiping had a lot of imagination. She now thought of Su Qingsang as a poor little girl who had been oppressed by the Su family. Even if Su Qingsang promised her that she was doing well, she wouldn't believe it. She would only think that Su Qingsang was lying to her. All these years you've always given in to them, but how did they treat you? Xiang Kaiping's voice was so soft that only Su Qingsang, who was sitting next to her, could hear it. She could still clearly hear the anger in her voice. He sighed helplessly and said, Mom, I've been living well all these years. She put aside the desire she had when she was young and the indifference of the Su family. She was well fed and well clothed, so she was not short of money. She used to want to work to get rid of the Su family, but later Su Qinghui bought her a house, so she gave up. She put all her heart and soul into her studies, so her grades were better than the average person's. It's really good. Don't lie to me. Xiang Kaiping would not listen to her explanation. She had already stubbornly decided on what she believed. Seven looked at Yumi helplessly. Is it going to take a long time? Soon. Yumi knew that her role had come. She turned around and began to introduce the place they were going to next. Chapter 349. Su Qingshuang really didn't mind having conflicts with them, but Su Peixian was Su Qinghui's most beloved daughter. She couldn't guarantee that Su Qinghui wouldn't cause trouble for Xiang Kaiping because of that slap. It was better to have less trouble than more trouble. To Su Qingsang's relief, when they returned to the hot spring hotel that night, Su Peixian and the others had already left. She confirmed with the hotel owner again and again that they had indeed left. I was good. It would be best if they didn't run into each other. However, thinking about the slap that Xiang Kaiping gave Su Peixian, Su Qingsang didn't know why, but she felt a little uneasy. After thinking about it, she didn't tell Hu Jinyao about meeting Su Peixian. When Hu Jinyao called again in the evening, she only told him about some interesting things that happened during the day. Hu Jinyao was obviously very busy. She could even hear the sound of typing on the keyboard on the other end of the phone. After repeatedly reminding Hu Jinyao to take care of himself, Su Qingsang hung up. Seeing Xiang Kaiping sitting by the window, Su Qingsang put her arm around her shoulder and said, Mom, let's go. Didn't you say you were tired from shopping? Let's go to the hot spring again today. I don't want to go. She wasn't in the mood for the whole day. Mom, just think of it as keeping me company. Since Su Qingsang said so, Xiang Kaiping had no choice but to leave. She seemed to be fine on the surface, but Su Qingsang knew that Xiang Kaiping wouldn't get over it so easily. She didn't want to explain more. She would try her best to make Xiang Kaiping have fun and be happy for the rest of the trip. On the 3rd of New Year's Day, Su Qingsang's holiday ended. She had to work tomorrow. She was flying back home early in the morning. However, when she opened the door and was about to leave, she saw Hu Jinyao standing at the door and about to knock. It's you? Su Qingsang was surprised by his sudden appearance. Why are you here? Hu Jinyao smiled and reached out to hold her in his arms. He hugged her very tightly. Su Qingsang buried her face in his chest. The weather in Japan was getting colder on New Year's Day. Hu Jinyao's clothes were still cold, but Su Qingsang felt very warm and touched. After hugging her enough, Hu Jinyao held her face and kissed her lips. An extremely long and lingering kiss. When Su Qingsang was almost out of breath and her legs were weak, he finally let go of her. However, they were still standing close to each other with their foreheads touching hers. Did you miss me? Su Qingsang blushed a little. She looked at him and nodded slightly. Yes. Honey, I missed you too. Hu Jinyao hugged her again. Are you going to check out now? Yes. Su Qingsang nodded, suddenly realizing that Xiang Kaiping was still in the room. Sure enough, she was standing behind them with a smile on her face. Su Qingsang blushed even more. When she saw Hu Jinyao, she forgot that Xiang Kaiping was leaving with her. You haven't told me why you're here. Didn't I say I would accompany you to Japan? In the end, he had too much work to do and was only able to finish it last night. After sleeping for 2 hours, he flew over. I can't play with you, but I can take you home. Su Qingsang bit her lip. Her eyes fell on Hu Jinyao's face, as if only then did she realize that he didn't look well. He looked a little tired and his eyes were faintly bloodshot. There were dark circles under his eyes. Chapter 350. Although it wasn't a long flight from Lin City to Japan, Su Qingsang really felt sorry for him. It's okay, I'm in good health. It took 3 hours to fly from Lin City to Japan. However, it only took slightly more than an hour to fly from Rong City. Su Qingsang complained in a low voice, but the expression on her face was somewhat sweet. How could she not be touched and like such a thoughtful Hua Jinyao? Let's go. Let's go home. Hua Jinyao reached out his hand and said, Mom, give me my luggage. After seeing Hua Jinyao, Xiang Saiping's gloomy mood for the past few days was not completely swept away, but it did dissipate quite a bit. His daughter was blessed after all. Seeing how Hua Jinyao treated her now, she knew that she would definitely live a happy life in the future. If her daughter was happy, she would feel less guilty. Hua Jinyao didn't know about the change in Xiang Saiping's mood. He only felt that after the trip, Xiang Kaiping and Su Qingsang's relationship seemed to have improved. This kind of closeness was something he was happy to see. When they boarded the plane, Su Qingsang felt sorry for Hua Jinyao. She asked the stewardess to bring him a blanket and an eye mask so that he could have a good rest. Hua Jinyao leaned over and kissed the corner of her lips. Honey, are you feeling sorry for me? Don't worry, I'm in good health. It's okay to lose a few hours of sleep. Who cares about you? Her mother was still sitting in the back. Su Qingsang glared at him coquettishly. I care about myself. I've been playing for the past few days, so I'm going to sleep now. Is that so? Then hurry up and sleep. Hua Jinyao covered her body with the blanket and handed her the blindfold. All right. Let's sleep together. The two of them closed their eyes and lay down. Before Su Qingsang closed her eyes, she heard Hua Jinyao say, It's boring to sleep together on the plane. Qingsang, let's sleep together when we get back. Su Qingsang blushed. Hua Jinyao was always so flippant. Hua Jinyao's eyes were closed. He didn't speak, but his hands were tightly held between them. When Su Peixian got home, Li Qianxue was not there. She had a meeting to attend today. She was the host of the Lin City Women's Chamber of Commerce. She had to attend such meetings every time. Old Master Li was playing chess with Su Yusen. When he saw Su Peixian coming home, he waved at her. However, Su Peixian only responded casually and quickly rushed upstairs to her own room. What happened to your sister? Old Master Li looked at Su Yusen worriedly. Su Yusen picked up a chess piece and put it in place. He looked up because of Old Master Li's words. Who knows? Didn't he go to Japan to play? Maybe he's not having fun? She went out with Qiu Junjiu and the others. Why would she be unhappy? Not to mention Su Qinghui and Li Qianxue. Even Old Master Li was very fond of this granddaughter of his, who had always had a sweet mouth and was especially good at pleasing the elders. Just as he was about to ask Su Yusen to take a look, Su Peixian rushed down like a gust of wind. She had already changed her clothes and was about to run away. After Old Master Li put down a chess piece, he watched her rush in and out. He looked at Su Yusen and said, Why do I seem to see a palm print on your sister's face? You must be mistaken. Su Yusen was still thinking about his next move. He was a little distracted by Old Master Li's words. Who dared to hit my sister? Old Master Li stopped talking. He thought that he might have been mistaken. Chapter 351. After a day, the handprint on Su Peixian's face had faded a little. However, she didn't apply any medicine or do anything else. She returned to the country with this face. She wanted this handprint to remind her of the humiliation she had suffered in Japan. She also wanted Su Qinghui to see how Su Qingsang bullied her. Su Qinghui had been very busy recently. Even during the holidays he was still working overtime. Peixian, you're back. How was your trip to Japan? Su Qinghui didn't stop writing. When he saw Su Peixian, he just asked a question and lowered his head to deal with work. Dad, Su Peixian had already rushed in front of Su Qinghui. Her voice was unusual. Su Qinghui looked up at her and saw the handprint on his daughter's face at a glance. What happened to you? Su Qinghui suddenly stood up, walked around the desk and walked in front of Su Peixian. Who hit you? Who? There was obvious anger on his face. How could he have imagined that his precious daughter would be slapped in the face like this? In Lin City, who would dare to do such a thing? Dad. If Su Peixian had only been putting on an act at the beginning, she really felt aggrieved at this moment. He felt so wronged. She was really wronged, angry and full of hatred. Peixian. Su Qinghui had never seen Su Peijian like this. For a moment he only felt sorry for her. Don't cry. Tell me who hit you first. Su Peijian couldn't stop her emotions. It took her a long time to calm down. Peijian. Su Qinghui looked at his daughter crying so hard that her eyes were red. He really felt sorry for her. Don't cry. What happened to you? You said something. That. Su Peijian took a deep breath and calmed herself down. You won't let anyone bully me, right? Of course. Su Qinghui nodded. You're my daughter. How could I let anyone bully you? Then if someone bullies me, you'll also settle the score with that person, right? Of course. Su Qinghui nodded. No one will think about bullying you. Su Peijian nodded and finally felt relieved. The one who bullied me was Su Qingsang. Qingsang? Su Qinghui frowned when he heard this. Why are you again? Didn't you go to Japan? How could? Su Qinghui didn't believe that Su Qingsang would take the initiative to bully Su Peijian. She more or less knew Su Qingsang's personality. The less trouble the better. Why would he provoke Su Peijian for no reason? That. I didn't finish. The person who bullied me was Su Qingsang's mother. Su Qingsang's mother? Su Qinghui didn't understand. Who are you talking about? Su Qingsang's mother. Su Peijian recalled what Xiang Kaiping had said to her the other day. Her mother actually called my mother a mistress? She said that my mother snatched you away from her. This can't be real, right? She lied to me, right? What do you mean her mother, your mother? Su Qinghui thought of something and suddenly became a little confused. Tell me slowly. I can't understand you like this. Dad. Su Peijian had finally calmed down. Looking at Su Qinghui's face, she knew that he truly cared about her. She felt much more at ease. After calming down, she took a deep breath and told him about her encounter with Su Qingsang and her mother in Japan. Su Peijian was much less angry with Su Qingsang than Xiang Kaiping. After all, Su Qingsang was Su Qinghui's daughter. Chapter 352. How dare she hit her and humiliate her like that? Dad, tell me. I'm begging you to tell me that I'm not what that woman said. My mother is not what that woman said. Tell me, tell me. Su Peijian was a little agitated. She shook Su Qinghui's arm and insisted on an answer. Dad, tell me, tell me. She lied to me, didn't she? Didn't she? Su Qinghui was dumbfounded. He didn't expect things to develop like this. For him, this was really a shocking thing. How could this happen? How did Su Qingsang meet Su Peijian in Japan? Not only did they meet, but Xiang Kaiping and Su Peijian had sex? Looking at Su Peijian, Su Qinghui was speechless. For the first time in decades he felt a little confused. There was a kind of anxiety that things were out of his control. That kind of anxiety made his brain stop for a moment. Listening to Su Peijian's anxious voice, he suddenly calmed down. He didn't get his position in the Li group for more than 20 years for nothing. He didn't work hard to make the Su family what it was now. If he hadn't been able to weigh the pros and cons, how could he have become what he was now? Dad, tell me. Seeing that he didn't answer her, Su Peijian became more and more anxious. Was Su Qinghui really like what that woman said? Was it really because her mother took him from her? Peijian. Listen to me. Su Qinghui put his hand on Su Peijian's shoulder and said calmly, Don't worry about these things. Let's just forget about it. What? Su Peijian's eyes widened. She couldn't believe her ears. Dad, what did you say? I said let's just forget about it. That. Su Peijian raised her voice. She couldn't believe her ears. What did you say? Say it again. I said, is what that woman said true? The only thing Su Peijian could think of was this. Did my mother really take you from her? Peijian. Su Qinghui frowned. He wanted to explain, but Su Peijian didn't want to hear it. Don't call me that. She shook her head. Thinking of that woman, she wanted to slap her. Do you know that woman hit me? Hit me. Su Peijian couldn't take this lying down. Ever since we were young, you and my mother couldn't even bear to lay a finger on me, but that woman hit me? Peijian. You don't want to help me take revenge, don't want to help me punish the woman who bullied me and instead want me to let it go? Su Peijian took a big step back and kept shaking her head. So those were all true? You really don't love my mom? You love that woman. Su Qinghui frowned subconsciously. Peijian, it's not what you think. Your mother and I don't want to hear it. Su Peijian couldn't take it anymore. She waved her hand, her face full of despair. No wonder that woman dared to hit me. Peixian. Su Qinghui hadn't expected the conflict between Su Peixian and Xiang Kaiping. Chapter 353. Su Qinghui was stunned again. Subconsciously he resisted the idea. Peixian, I didn't. If you didn't, why didn't you help me? Su Peixian was now sure that Xiang Kaiping was telling the truth. You love that woman, so you'd rather watch me get bullied than help me, right? Peixian. What did he mean? Su Qinghui took her hand. Calm down. Many things are not what you think. I told you to let it go because I didn't want you to have a conflict with her. After all, she is Su Qingsang's mother, the woman you love the most, right? Su Peixian pushed Su Qinghui's hand away. The first half of her life had been smooth. If he wants the wind, if he wants the rain, he gets the rain. But recently she had kicked the biggest iron plate, and now she was being humiliated by her most respected father. Peixian, it's not what you think. Su Qinghui felt a headache when he saw Su Peixian like this. He almost blurted out the words that had been buried in his heart. Dad, don't find excuses for yourself. You can't explain yourself because I'm right. I'm right about everything. Is that right? Su Peixian couldn't listen to it anymore. She only felt that she had been hurt, greatly hurt. Dad, you just watched an outsider bully me. Are you worthy of me and my mother? Su Qinghui's eyes widened. He took a step forward and seemed to want to explain. Peixian, listen to me. Actually, Su Peixian didn't listen. Su Qinghui was a little anxious. His determination to disregard everything had reached its peak at this moment. Peixian, you may not believe what I'm going to say next, but it's true. Su Peixian's phone rang. Su Peixian didn't want to listen to Su Qinghui's explanation. She avoided him and answered the phone on the other side. Peixian, I heard you're back. Where are you? The call was from Li Qianxue. Su Peixian seemed to have found a way to vent. She couldn't control herself when facing Li Qianxue. Mom, Peixian, what's wrong? Li Qianxue had never heard her daughter cry like this. Not even when she broke off the engagement with Qiu Yanbao. Peixian. Su Qinghui took a step forward, looked at Su Peixian and kept winking at her. Mom, I was bullied. Su Peixian didn't notice the look in Su Qinghui's eyes. Since Su Qinghui wasn't willing to make the decision for her, she would look for someone who could. Are you with your father? Wait a minute. I'll be right there. Li Qianxue heard Su Peixian's complaint and said without thinking, You're in the company? Give me a few minutes. I happen to be nearby. Su Peixian hung up the phone. When she saw Su Qinghui's hesitant face, she couldn't help but feel resentful. Dad, since you're not willing to stand up for me, I can only let my mom stand up for me. Peixian. Su Qinghui knew that Li Qianxue would come over later. He couldn't tell Su Peixian what he had wanted to tell her. He rubbed the space between his eyebrows tiredly and suddenly felt a great sense of powerlessness. He knew Li Qianxue's personality. The situation was getting out of control. 15 minutes later, Li Qianxue appeared in Su Qinghui's office. When she saw the handprint on Su Peixian's face, her whole face turned livid. Chapter 354. Su Peixian returned home a day earlier than Su Qingsang. Therefore, Su Qingsang didn't know that Xiang Caiping's slap had caused Li Qianxue and Su Peixian's greatest dissatisfaction. He had just gotten off the plane. Looking at Hu Jinyao, who looked much better after a long rest, she relaxed a little. The temperature in Japan was lower than in Lin City. Su Qingsang felt a little hot after getting off the plane. The first thing Hu Jinyao did was to take off the thick coat for her. Let's go. Yang Wenchang will come to pick us up later. Su Qingsang rested for a while on the plane and felt much better now. She looked at Xiang Kaiping worriedly and shook her head at him. I slept for a while on the plane. I feel much better now. Then let's go home. They went home. Although Su Qingsang went out with Xiang Kaiping, she still bought some things. Su Peixian naturally didn't need them. She brought gifts for her colleagues in the department. There were also gifts for Su Qinghui. Most importantly, they were for Shi Mengwan. Su Qingsang called her almost as soon as she got home and asked her to come over for dinner and gifts. After resting in the afternoon, Sister Lu came over with a bunch of ingredients at Hu Jinyao's order. After a few days in Japan, Su Qingsang wanted to eat hot pot. Xiang Kaiping said that it wasn't hygienic outside and suggested to cook at home. Su Qingsang knew that she was in a bad mood these days, so she wanted to have hot pot to liven things up. Sister Lu bought a lot of ingredients including big bones. She asked Sister Lu to make soup with big bones according to the method on the internet. Then she added hot pot seasoning. One side was chili oil and the other was clear soup. Xiang Kaiping washed and picked vegetables with her. The gloomy mood of the past few days was swept away. Su Qingsang was more or less relieved. Shi Mengwan came over before it was time for dinner. She had won that award and many people were getting married at the end of the year. He was actually very busy. When Su Qingsang saw her, she found that there were dark circles under her eyes. What's wrong? Didn't you sleep well? Yeah. Shi Mengwan yawned. I was drawing until 2 last night. Su Qingsang frowned and felt a little sorry for her. You're not in a hurry. You can hire someone to help you. Why do you have to make yourself so tired? It's fine. I'm used to it. Shi Mengwan wrapped her arms around her neck and said, You on the other hand look good. Did you have fun? It's all right. Hu Jinyao did not come back. Xiang Kaiping was helping out in the kitchen. There were some things that she could talk to Shi Mengwan about. He pulled her into the room saying that he was there to get her a present. He told her about how he had met Su Peixian in Japan and how Xiang Kaiping had slapped her. What did you say? Shi Mengwan's eyes widened in shock. In addition to shock, there was also a hint of worship. Your mother slapped Su Peixian? Shoo. Su Qingsang gestured for them to keep quiet and looked outside. It's already happened. Now that I'm back, I have a headache. Are you afraid of Su Peixian or Li Qianxue? No matter who it was, Hu Jinyao had a way to deal with it, right? That's not it. Su Qingsang shook her head. What was to come would come. He had never thought of running away. My mother is a thoughtful person. She always feels that she owes me for all these years. So I. Chapter 355. Smart. That's what I mean. After spending so much time with Xiang Kaiping, Su Qingsang really saw her as her mother. She didn't want her to suffer. It's nothing. Leave it to me. Shi Mengwan patted Su Qingsang's shoulder as she spoke. Don't worry. Su Qingsang knew Shi Mengwan very well. Compared with her somewhat dull personality, Shi Mengwan was much more cheerful and lively. Xiang Kaiping had always liked her. With her around, she would be happier. Let's go. Let's go out. Su Qingsang held Shi Mengwan's arm. I'm not worried. Hu Jinyao and I were thinking about something else. What? Move to Rong City. You want to leave this place? Shi Mengwan was really shocked this time. Just to avoid the Su family? Su Qingsang shook her head. Not really. Hu Jinyao was originally from Rong City. He had been developing his career here because of me. His grandfather always wants us to go back. Shi Mengwan didn't say anything. In fact, she didn't know what to say. Hu Jinyao was married to Su Qingsang. It was normal for him to want to bring Su Qingsang home. However, she was still very reluctant. Qingsang, I don't want you to go. It's still early. It was just a decision. Don't worry. We'll be together for a long time. Shi Mengwan sighed and hugged Su Qingsang tightly. If I had known, I wouldn't have let you marry Hu Jinyao. Sure. I won't marry him. I'll marry you. I support you. Shi Mengwan's eyes widened. Hurry up and abandon him. Come into my arms. That won't do. Hu Jinyao was leaning against the door and looking at the two of them. The wife is mine. Don't even think about taking her away from me. You're back. Su Qingsang smiled and let go of Shi Mengwan's hand. Just in time. We can start eating. I'm just informing you that you can eat now. Go. Hu Jinyao stepped forward, took Su Qingsang's hand and led her out. Shi Mengwan clicked her tongue at the back, looking hurt. My husband abandoned me as soon as he arrived. You even said you wanted to throw yourself into my arms. Woman, you really value love over friendship. Let's go. You talk too much. Su Qingsang was amused by her. He turned around and extended his hand to Shi Mengwan, but she avoided it with a proud look on her face. Thanks. There was no need for that. I'm not going to be your third wheel. With these words, she went outside. Xiang Kaiping had just put the pot on the dining table and was smiling when she saw her. Mengwan, it's time to eat. Auntie. Shi Mengwan stepped forward to hold her arm. Qingsang bullied me. Ah. Xiang Kaiping looked at Shi Mengwan, who was accusing Su Qingsang of forgetting friends in love. Xiang Kaiping had always been beautiful, and her facial features carried a kind of flamboyant beauty. Coupled with her crisp voice and lively words, Xiang Kaiping was amused by her. He made Xiang Kaiping happy and kept talking to her. Shi Mengwan sat down and winked at Su Qingsang. Seeing that, Su Qingsang smiled and made a gesture of thanks. The two sisters thought that no one else could see their little tricks, but in fact Hu Jinyao saw it. Her eyes fell on Su Qingsang. She smiled faintly as she watched Shi Mengwan and Xiang Kaiping talk. Her eyes were curved with a faint smile. Chapter 356. Su Qingsang noticed Hu Jinyao's movement and turned to smile at him. Both Shi Mengwan and Xiang Kaiping noticed their subtle movements. Xiang Kaiping heaved a sigh of relief. There was a hint of envy and gloom in Shi Mengwan's eyes. She thought about how she met Zhang Haoze a few days ago. Unlike Su Qingsang's luck, Hu Jinyao was hers and only hers. Su Qingsang was standing next to him. However, there was another woman beside Zhang Haoze. The person beside him was not her. More importantly, Zhang Haoze had long forgotten their agreement. Shaking her head, Shi Mengwan's emotional change only lasted for a moment. Soon she was talking and laughing again. He had his daughter, son-in-law, and Shi Mengwan. As expected, Xiang Kaiping was in high spirits. What happened in the past had already happened. In the future she would treat her daughter even better. He picked up the beef from the pot and put it into Su Qingsang's bowl, then put some vegetables into Shi Mengwan's bowl. The atmosphere was joyous and harmonious. Just when the atmosphere was good, the doorbell of Su Qingsang's house rang. Su Qingsang and Hu Jinyao looked at each other. He put a hand on her shoulder and got up to open the door. The person standing outside the door was Su Qinghui. Obviously, he didn't expect Hu Jinyao to open the door. He was taken aback. The dining room was connected to the living room. Su Qingsang was sitting at the edge of the dining table near the living room. Seeing Hu Jinyao standing still, she turned her head and saw Su Qinghui at the door. Frowning, she subconsciously looked at Xiang Kaiping, who was sitting beside her. The smell of hot pot in the restaurant was very strong. Naturally, Su Qinghui also smelled it. You're eating? Hu Jinyao nodded slightly. Yes, we just started eating. Have you eaten, Dad? No, Su Qinghui answered subconsciously. After that, he felt a little uncomfortable. You guys go ahead. Su Qingsang felt a little awkward. She was supposed to invite Su Qinghui in for dinner, but Xiang Kaiping turned her face away from the man. She was still upset. When Shi Mengwan saw this, she tried to smooth things over again. Hello, uncle. As she spoke, she gave Su Qingsang a look. Su Qingsang sighed, stood up and walked over to Hu Jinyao. Dad, if you haven't eaten, let's eat together. But I don't know if you'll eat it. We're having hot pot today. Hot pot? Hey. Su Qinghui was a little surprised. He glanced at Su Qingsang and walked in. The dining table was rectangular. Su Qingsang and Hu Jinyao sat on one side, while Xiang Kaiping and Shi Mengwan sat on the other. Sister Lu was sitting next to Su Qinghui, so there was only one seat left for him. Su Qinghui sat down with Su Qingsang on his left and Xiang Kaiping on his right. Some ingredients had been placed on the table, but there was still a lot left. The yuanyang pot was steaming hot at this time. Su Qinghui had never experienced such a scene before. He went from being the manager of the Li Corporation to the general manager of the Li Corporation. When he was with Li Qianxue, his status became higher and higher, and fewer people dared to act casually in front of him. In the Li family, old Master Li had high blood pressure and a light but healthy diet. When he was outside, he would order a separate portion of the company's lunch. As for socializing outside, they would all go to high-end hotels, and the people they interacted with were all business elites or directors. There was no such thing as a table full of people eating hot pot together. Looking at the steaming hot pot, the smell was actually a little strong, but the smell was surprisingly appetizing. Chapter 357. The atmosphere was a bit stagnant. Su Qinghui didn't speak, and so did the others. Xiang Kaiping frowned and looked at the ingredients in the pot. Finally, she picked up a piece of meat and put it in Su Qingsang's bowl. Eat. Thanks, Mom. The corners of Su Qingsang's mouth twitched. She knew that Xiang Kaiping was a little annoyed that Su Qinghui had come at this time. Dad, you should eat too. Xiang Kaiping could ignore her father, but Su Qingsang couldn't. I don't know if you'll like it. If you don't like spicy food, you can have the clear broth over here. Su Qingsang knew that Su Qinghui and his family usually ate light food. All right. Su Qinghui didn't refuse. After Sister Lu got him a bowl, he started eating. Shi Mengwan was a little reserved at first. After all, she was also a little afraid of Su Qinghui. However, thinking about today's mission and looking at Xiang Caiping's cold face, she had no choice but to continue playing the role of the Joker. Eat this. Qingsang likes it very much too. Shi Mengwan picked up a shrimp dumpling for Xiang Kaiping. Really? These days, Xiang Kaiping was still trying to get along with Su Qingsang. She also wanted to know what Su Qingsang liked to eat. Did you guys go to hot pot often in the past? Yes. Especially when the weather is cold. Shi Mengwan glanced at Su Qingsang as she spoke. You don't know. Qingsang had a hard time taking the postgraduate entrance examination. He would read until 1 or 2 in the morning every day. She even forgot to eat dinner a few times, and I was the one who brought her food. You're so nice to Qingsang. Xiang Kaiping glanced at Qingsang as she spoke. No matter how much you think about your studies, your health is the most important. Don't do this again. Mom, I didn't. Listen to her exaggeration. Su Qingsang glanced at Shi Mengwan and said, why don't you say that you're still drawing at 3 or 4 o'clock in the morning? Yes. You were the one who brought me food so that I wouldn't starve to death. She looked at Xiang Kaiping and said, Auntie, you don't know this, but Qingsang took care of me more. After all, my life has been turned upside down more than hers. You are all good children. It's not that exaggerated. Su Qingsang sensed Hu Jinyao's gaze and explained blandly, actually, we lived together during that time. Let's take care of each other. That's right, the room you're living in now used to be mine. Later, Shi Mengwan chose a studio far away and made money, so she moved out. But when he was free, he would still come back to stay for 2 days. After Su Qingsang got married, he came less often. You can come and stay next time as long as you don't mind. Auntie, what are you talking about? Why would I despise you? Shi Mengwan made a fist gesture. Qingsang is like a sister to me. Her mother is my mother. With Shi Mengwan around, the atmosphere of the meal was the same as before. Su Qinghui didn't say anything. He sat there and listened to other people talking about his daughter. It wasn't the first time he looked at his daughter, but it was the first time he looked at her so seriously. Unbeknownst to him, Su Qingsang had grown from a child to a young lady. Her smile was not as gorgeous as Su Peision's, but it was extremely gentle. His eyes were curved as if he could see the shadow of his youth. Chapter 358. Su Qinghui suddenly fell silent. He noticed that both Hu Jinyao and Xiang Kaiping liked to put food in Su Qingsang's bowl. He listened to Shi Mengwan talk about some interesting things that happened to Su Qingsang when she was a postgraduate student in university. He also remembered some interesting things that Su Qingsang had encountered in the hospital. He suddenly realized that this was the first time he had been so close to his daughter, and the first time he had understood her so well. Before that, all his memories of his daughter were of Su Peision. When did Su Peision start to grow teeth, talk and walk? He remembered clearly when he was in kindergarten, when he entered university, and when he received his first love letter from a male classmate. What about Su Qingsang? But he couldn't remember at all. He did not speak. He was silent and no one spoke to him. Occasionally, Hu Jinyao would ask him about work cooperation, but he answered absent-mindedly. He thought about the purpose of his visit today and his gaze fell on Xiang Kaiping. She was looking at Su Qingsang and listening to her talk about some interesting interns in the hospital. Her eyes were filled with a loving smile. She only had eyes for her daughter. I'm so full. Shi Mengwan patted her belly. I'm going to die. Tomorrow I'll really gain 1 kilogram. With your figure, it doesn't matter if you gain another 5 kilograms. Although Shi Mengwan wasn't thin, she definitely wasn't fat. Don't. It was getting colder and I could feel the flesh on my waist getting thicker. If I keep eating like this, I'm going to lose weight. Little girls, why would you want to lose weight? Xiang Kaiping looked at the two of them. You're not allowed to lose weight. Body first. Especially Mengwan, next time you come over, I will cook something delicious for you. Auntie. You'll feed me like a pig. Who said that? How can there be such a beautiful pig? Xiang Caiping's teasing made Shi Mengwan burst into laughter. The smile on Su Qingsang's face finally widened. I'm full too. So full. Su Qingsang straightened up and found that Su Qinghui was still sitting in his seat. She rolled her eyes and looked at Hu Jinyao. Why don't we go out for a walk? Digestion? I'll go too. Shi Mengwan also stood up. Let's go together. Do you mind if I'm the third wheel? I do mind. I don't mind. Su Qingsang couldn't help but glare at him. What are you doing? Hu Jinyao cleared his throat. It's getting late. I'm going back to rest. Shi Mengwan blinked and turned to look at Xiang Kaiping. Auntie, look at this. I was given the cold shoulder. Auntie doesn't mind you. You stay here with Auntie. Auntie, thank you. Shi Mengwan clutched her chest, still looking hurt. But I'm hurt. I'm going home to comfort my broken heart alone. Mengwan, Mom, let's go down first. Su Qingsang couldn't stay any longer. She could tell that Su Qinghui had something to say to Xiang Kaiping. It was better for them not to stay there and cause trouble. Qingsang. Su Qingsang held Xiang Caiping's hand, intending to pull her hand away. Let's go for a walk in the neighborhood downstairs. It'll be fine. Auntie. Have to go too. Shi Mengwan stood up. Shi, I can't be a third wheel. I still have to go home to draw. The three young people left. Sister Lu swiftly cleaned up the table and bowls before taking her leave. Chapter 359. There was still a faint smell of hot pot in the air, and the lively atmosphere just now had disappeared without a trace. Xiang Kaiping wanted to go back to her room. She thought of something and got up to sit down in the living room. She turned on the phone, picked up the sweater that was half knitted and started knitting again. Su Qinghui had been sitting at the dining table. After his daughter and son-in-law left, he stood up straight and stood next to Xiang Kaiping. Xiang Kaiping ignored him. He walked to her and sat down. Kaiping. Xiang Kaiping didn't stop knitting. She didn't even look at him. Her actions made Su Qinghui feel annoyed. Looking at Xiang Caiping's wrinkled face, which was no longer young, he felt very complicated. Did he love her? He didn't know. But he felt pity and heartache. Xiang Caiping's appearance made it much easier to find out about her past. Su Qinghui had also sent someone to investigate. He had also read the reports. It was because of that he felt a little heartache. In fact, he and Xiang Kaiping grew up together. They were childhood sweethearts, and their relationship was the most precious and understanding. He understood Xiang Kaiping and knew that she was weak. However, such a weak woman had to learn to work hard like a man. It really made his heart ache. He sighed and thought of something that had been troubling him. Kaiping, did you go to Japan with Qingsang a few days ago? Xiang Kaiping didn't answer him. She raised the sweater and looked at it. The bottom of the sweater was already knitted. She was thinking about how to knit a pattern on it. Kaiping. Su Qinghui knew that she was angry with him, but he thought that such anger would dissipate. Xiang Kaiping put down the sweater and looked at him coldly. You already know. Why are you asking me? Su Qinghui was speechless. Xiang Caiping's stubbornness made him feel a little helpless. Yes, I know. Pei also went to Japan and met you. Xiang Kaiping knew when he said this. She chuckled and a rare hint of mockery appeared in her eyes. Su Qinghui, are you here to stand up for your daughter? Kaiping, what are you talking about? Isn't it? Xiang Kaiping sneered. Qingsang couldn't have told you that I went to Japan with Qingsang, so it can only be that good daughter of yours. She didn't just tell me that she went to Japan with Qingsang, right? She also told you that I slapped her, right? Su Qinghui looked at Xiang Kaiping. He had never seen her so sharp. Kaiping, what are you doing here today? So you're here to stand up for your daughter? Xiang Kaiping could only feel an inexplicable anger rising in her. Li Qianshue's daughter was a human being. Was Xiang Caiping's daughter not a human being? Kaiping, why would you think of me this way? Su Qinghui widened his eyes and stared at Xiang Kaiping. He couldn't stand her sharp words. I wanted to talk to you about Pei today, but I definitely didn't want to help her vent her anger. What's that? Xiang Kaiping hated Su Qinghui the moment she saw him. She hated his heartlessness, hated his indifference. Hate his selfishness. She also hated him for not caring about Su Qingsang. Since you're not here to help her vent her anger, are you here to apologize for her rudeness? Rudeness? Apologize. Su Qinghui was stunned. Chapter 360. Su Qinghui was stunned. Peijin. Xiang Kaiping could tell from his expression that he didn't know about it at all. The anger on her face grew. Look, you don't know what happened and you don't know what your good daughter said. Why are you here in such a hurry to avenge her? Kaiping, you're not what? You're not here to explain for your good daughter? You're not here to avenge Li Qianshue's daughter? Then tell me, what are you here for? Su Qinghui was silent, looking at Xiang Kaiping's agitated face. He couldn't say a word. You can't speak, can you? Xiang Kaiping didn't want to see Su Qinghui. He hadn't changed much in all these years. He was still elegant and handsome. Not only did he not age, but he also became more mature, adding to the charm of a mature man. But now, no matter how handsome Su Qinghui was, he couldn't move her at all. She only had hatred for him. Su Qinghui, I don't want to see you. Get out. Su Qinghui sat still. He thought of how Li Qianshue's face turned pale when she found out that Su Peijin had been slapped yesterday. He knew Li Qianshue's personality and her bottom line. Li Qianshue's bottom line was her children. She was fierce in public, but in front of Su Peijin and Su Yusen, she had the heart of a mother. Su Peijin had been slapped and Li Qianshue had to avenge her. If she hadn't known that Su Qingsang and Xiang Kaiping were still in Japan, she would have come here long ago. Kaiping. Su Qinghui closed his eyes. He lowered his head and rubbed his temples, feeling exhausted again. You shouldn't have hit Peijin. If one day Xiang Kaiping knew everything, would she regret it? He didn't know, but he was sure that he did. Because he had never thought that Xiang Kaiping, whom he thought he would never see again, would come back one day. Xiang Kaiping was shaking with anger. She stood up and pulled Su Qinghui up, who was still in a daze. She kept pulling his arm. Get out, get out. Su Qinghui, I don't want to see you for the rest of my life. Kaiping. When Su Qinghui's body was about to touch the door, he couldn't help but yell, Qingsang is not your daughter at all. Xiang Kaiping stopped shoving him. The night wind was a little chilly. Shi Mengwan went downstairs, took her gift, said goodbye to Su Qingsang and went home. It was the end of the year, but she was still busy drawing. There were many things to do. Su Qingsang felt sorry for her and told her several times not to stay up too late. Shi Mengwan waved her hand, started the car and left. After Shi Mengwan left, Su Qingsang turned around and found that Hu Jinyao had been staring at her. What's wrong? He looked at her like that. Was there something on her face? Honey. Hu Jinyao put his arms around her waist and said, I'm a little jealous. You care so much about Shi Mengwan. You've never cared about me like this. Su Qingsang looked up at him helplessly. Hu Jinyao, aren't you childish? Not childish. Hu Jinyao pecked her lips. I'm your husband and you're my wife. You should treat me the best. Chapter 361. I don't know. Hu Jinyao didn't care about Su Qinghui. The two families were cooperating. For the sake of Su Qingsang's father, he would give him some face. However, it was impossible for Su Qinghui to bully Su Qingsang. I'm worried. Su Qingsang didn't tell Hu Jinyao about what happened in Japan. But now, Su Qingsang was worried that Su Qinghui would come to Xiang Kaiping because Su Peijin was beaten up. What are you worried about? Hu Jinyao sensed something different. Nothing. She decided not to tell Hu Jinyao. Su Qingsang shook her head, believing that Xiang Kaiping could handle it herself. Hu Jinyao narrowed his eyes and looked at her. His arms around her waist suddenly tightened. Tell me, what's going on? Su Qingsang pressed her lips into a straight line and held Hu Jinyao's hand instead. Nothing. I just don't understand. What? Tell me, does my dad love my mom or my auntie? The auntie she was referring to was Li Qianshue. After calling her that for so many years, she couldn't change the way she addressed her. Moreover, Xiang Kaiping wasn't there now. She wouldn't be able to hear her calling Xiang Kaiping like that. You'll have to ask him himself. Hu Jinyao didn't see that Su Qinghui loved Xiang Kaiping or Li Qianshue. If he loved my mother, then why did he stay under the same roof with auntie for so many years? If he loves auntie, why is he pestering my mother now? Do you want to hear the truth? Hu Jinyao squeezed her hand with an unruly smile on his face. Speak. In my opinion, your father doesn't love anyone but himself. Su Qingsang pinched him and said, I think he's a philanthropist. I love my mom, but I can't let go of auntie. Are you saying that your father loves Su Peijian's mother? I don't know. Su Qingsang stopped walking and looked at the shadows of the trees in the neighborhood. But there's something that I've never told my mother or anyone else. What is it? What could he not tell Xiang Kaiping? Probably a few years ago. When I was in college, I went home to get something. Su Peijian and Su Yusen were not at home that day. When I came in, I heard that aunt was sick. I lived with the Su family and studied medicine, so I wanted to see her. Then I saw my dad. Li Qianxue had always been in good health. That illness was one of the few times that Su Qingsang could remember. She went upstairs and was about to go to Li Qianshue's room to take a look when she found that the door of Li Qianshue's room was not closed. She was sick at that time and her face was burning red. She seemed to be in pain on the bed. When she was about to go in, she saw Su Qinghui coming out of the bathroom. She didn't know what she was thinking at the time, but she subconsciously avoided him and hid by the door. However, that action of hers was unnecessary. At that time, Su Qinghui didn't have time to visit her. With a towel in his hand, he stood by the bed and stared at Li Qianshue's face for a long time. His expression seemed to be hesitating. Finally, he placed it on Li Qianshue's forehead. Actually, I've only seen my dad like that once. I don't know how to describe his expression at that time. In any case, it was very complicated. At that time, she didn't understand love, let alone love. She had a vague idea that Su Qinghui probably had feelings for Li Qianxue. Chapter 362. That was the only time. Later, when she left quietly, she secretly paid attention to the way Su Qinghui and Li Qianxue interacted. She found that Su Qinghui and Li Qianxue were a respectful couple in front of old Master Li, but in private he was as cold as he could be. He was so cold that she began to suspect that she might have been wrong that day, or that Su Qinghui felt that he hadn't tortured Li Qianxue enough, so he couldn't bear to see her sick and die. So, do you think my father loves Auntie? Are you trying to say that your father is a scumbag? Eating from the bowl, thinking about the pot? Hu Jinyao touched his chin and made such an annotation. Su Qingsang gritted her teeth and hit his chest hard. What are you talking about? She did think that Su Qinghui was not a good man. However, hearing Hu Jinyao talk about his biological father like that, she felt a little strange. Don't talk about my father like that. It was not good for Su Qinghui to hear it. Su Qingsang turned her face to look at him, and her eyes were a little teasing. If I say that again, you're a scumbag? Don't you men all like that? Eating from the bowl, thinking about the pot? Don't wrongly accuse me. Hu Jinyao held her body in his arms. I'm not included in the people you're talking about. You're not a man. Wife. Hu Jinyao's face was serious, but there was an obvious hint in his eyes. Tonight you can fully experience whether I'm a man or not. Su Qingsang's face suddenly turned red and she was speechless. All right, let's go back. Don't worry, wife. Hu Jinyao didn't move but instead pulled her back into his arms. I'm a narrow-minded person, so I can only accommodate you. Su Qingsang stared at him. In the night, Hu Jinyao's eyes were as bright as stars, and only her shadow could be seen in them. She felt as if her heart had been hit hard by Hu Jinyao, and her whole heart beat uncontrollably. Wife. I'm serious. Su Qingsang's face was burning. It was not the first time she had heard Hu Jinyao's confession, but it was the first time she had such a strong emotional fluctuation. She looked down and nodded. I believe you. What about you? Hu Jinyao lifted her chin and made her look at him. What about your heart? My heart. Su Qingsang didn't understand the love between a man and a woman before this. She once had a crush on a senior in high school, but then the two of them went to different schools, so it ended. She was busy studying in university and didn't have time to date. Being with Wei Lenin was just to get rid of the Su family, so it didn't count. Looking into Hu Jinyao's eyes, she subconsciously nodded and said, I'm also very narrow-minded. After pretending to be Hu Jinyao, she probably wouldn't be able to pretend to be anyone else. Now she was trying her best to put Hu Jinyao into her heart bit by bit. Hu Jinyao smiled. The corners of his lips were raised in a handsome and unruly way. He lowered his head and kissed Su Qingsang's lips. Su Qingsang's legs were a little weak and she put her hands on his shoulders. Her response made his eyes heat up, and he was about to take another step further. Suddenly, a cat meowed from somewhere and then a wild cat jumped out of the bushes. Su Qingsang was shocked. Only then did she realize that she had kissed Hu Jinyao in the garden of this neighborhood. Fortunately, there weren't many people around, or it would have been really embarrassing. Chapter 363. Hu Jinyao didn't object. Xiang Kaiping and Su Qinghui might not be done yet, but it was good to go back and take a look. If what Su Qingsang said was true, then the purpose of Su Qinghui's visit today was a little curious. Hu Jinyao had thought that Su Qinghui's behavior was a little strange, but now it came back to him again. He was thinking, what exactly is wrong? The idea that he had faintly thought about before surged into his mind again. While Hu Jinyao was still thinking, Su Qingsang had already pulled him upstairs, and at the same time the door of their house opened. Su Qinghui stood by the door and Xiang Kaiping was pushing him out. Su Qinghui raised his eyes and saw Su Qingsang's face. He was stunned for a moment. Not only him but Xiang Kaiping, who was standing behind the door, also turned pale. Many years ago Su Qinghui did something extremely crazy. It was a crazy thing that made him think about it from time to time. He felt happy but also a little hesitant. That year he accidentally had sex with Li Qianxue. To him this was just an accident. What's more, he didn't like Li Qianxue at all. She was fierce, domineering and arrogant. He didn't like her very much. He had a childhood sweetheart, Xiang Kaiping. After having sex with Li Qianxue that day, he felt a little guilty and blamed himself. Therefore, when she got home, she treated Xiang Kaiping even better. Of course, he also needed to use this method to remind himself who he liked. Who was he going to marry? However, who would have thought that Li Qianxue would unexpectedly get pregnant just like that? What kind of person was Li Qianxue? At that time, she was the daughter of the Li family and the marketing manager of the Li Corporation. She had the means and the status. More importantly, she still had a father who doted on her like a jewel because her biological mother had passed away early. The Li family and the Chou family were the two largest families in Lin City at that time. They were family friends. At that time, half of the companies in Lin City followed their lead. As for the other companies, there was no need to mention them. If he didn't marry Li Qianxue, not only would he lose his job, but he would also not be able to stay in Lin City. He wanted to be tough for once, but at that time there were a lot of things to do at home. In desperation, he agreed to marry Li Qianxue. Although Su Qinghui had agreed to marry Li Qianxue, it was still hard for him to accept the fact. He could marry Li Qianxue and spend the rest of his life with Li Qianxue, but he couldn't swallow the feeling of being forced to marry someone else. Even if he couldn't swallow it, he had to. The wedding was held and he and Li Qianxue became husband and wife. Not only that, but Li Qianxue's belly was getting bigger and bigger. A business of the Li Corporation that he had not been responsible for before was also given to him. He knew that this was another form of compensation from old Master Li. But that was not what he wanted. He was ambitious and wanted to stand out, but he didn't want to rely on women. Every day he was thinking about how to get back at Li Qianxue. Divorce? No, I can't. Bring down the Li Corporation? At that time he didn't have that kind of ability. Kill Li Qianxue? No. He wouldn't do anything criminal. Therefore he wouldn't even attack the Li group. The thought of stealing trade secrets had never crossed his mind. It was true that he wanted revenge, but he would never put himself in danger. He struggled every day, especially after he heard that Xiang Kaiping was also pregnant. Such thoughts grew like wild weeds. Chapter 364. All of Su Qinghui's revenge was just his imagination. He didn't have a plan. Until Li Qianxue gave birth to a daughter. It was such a coincidence. Li Qianxue's child was born at full term. However, Xiang Kaiping was not. Her body was weak and she was born half a month early. The child was born one day after Li Qianxue's child. When he saw the child, he thought of Li Qianxue, who was still asleep because she had given birth to the child. A crazy and bold idea flashed through his mind. He didn't want to marry Li Qianxue, but he did. He wanted to marry Xiang Kaiping, but he could not. Li Qianxue, aren't you very capable? Isn't the Li family very powerful? If he took Li Qianxue's child away, what would happen to her? Old Master Li had been watching over his daughter. The child was in the nursery. The right time, the right place, and the right people were cooperating with Su Qinghui. He finally made up his mind. He carried Xiang Kaiping's daughter into the nursery and took Li Qianxue's baby away. In fact, he had thought of even more ruthless ideas. It was to send Li Qianxue's child to the orphanage. He wanted Li Qianxue to regret it. But when he held the baby girl, he hesitated for a moment. No matter how much he disliked Li Qianxue, no matter how much he hated her, this child was still his. In the end, Li Qianxue's child was not sent to the orphanage. He asked someone to take care of him and hired someone to take care of Xiang Kaiping. Li Qianxue woke up the next day. The first thing she did after waking up was to see her daughter. Before he could name the child, old Master Li had given her a name, Peixian. Everything was a foregone conclusion. He had done a perfect job of stealing the dragon and changing the phoenix. A month later he found an excuse to start a cold war with Li Qianxue. Then when she gave in, he carried Su Qingsang home. That was the darkest thought in his mind when he was young. Li Qianxue, aren't you arrogant? Li Qianxue, aren't you proud? I'll put your biological daughter in front of you and let you look at her every day, but you won't know her and you won't recognize her. I want you to treat your own daughter as an illegitimate daughter. If you make things difficult for her, you will be making things difficult for your own daughter. In fact, there was a time when Su Qinghui really wanted to see Li Qianxue make things difficult for Su Qingsang. Unfortunately, Li Qianxue was a very proud person. She didn't want to make things difficult for someone she didn't like. At most, they would just ignore him. But this was enough. Su Qinghui watched as Li Qianxue ignored Su Qingsang. He watched as she was considerate to Su Peixian, but never gave Su Qingsang a good look. He finally felt a lot better after being forced to marry her. After venting his anger, he began to worry again for a while. He was worried that Su Peixian would look like Xiang Kaiping. He was worried that Su Qingsang would look like Li Qianxue. In that case, Li Qianxue would definitely be able to tell. That was because Li Qianxue and Xiang Kaiping did not look the same at all. The two of them did not look alike at all. However, it seemed that even the heavens were on his side. As Su Peixian grew up, she looked neither like him nor Li Qianxue. Instead, she looked more like Su Qinghui's deceased mother. Su Peixian's genes had been passed down through generations, so Su Peixian couldn't be found to be similar to them at all. At most, her eyebrows, eyes, and demeanor were vaguely similar to his. That was all. However, as Su Qingsang grew up, she looked more and more like him. Many times when he looked at his two daughters, he could only sigh that this was really fate. Chapter 365. In the end, Su Qinghui's worries became less and less as time went by. In the past few years, they had completely disappeared without a trace. He enjoyed the result and the fact that Li Qianxue was kept in the dark and ignorant. He was waiting. He wanted to live longer than Li Qianxue. One day when Li Qianxue was dying and about to leave this world, he would tell her that the daughter she had doted on for decades was actually born from the woman she hated the most. He would tell her that everything of the Li family finally fell on a child who was not Li Qianxue. He imagined the expression Li Qianxue might have, the reaction she might have, and the feeling of Li Qianxue dying with her eyes open. He felt that only then would he have a sense of accomplishment in revenge. However, Su Qinghui didn't expect that there would be such a big change in his revenge plan. First, Su Qingsang married Hu Jinyao so that she, who could only live an ordinary life for the rest of her life, had a new opportunity. Second, Su Qingsang would meet Xiang Kaiping, and Xiang Kaiping would think that Su Qingsang was her daughter. Both of these things were beyond Su Qinghui's expectations. This was not what he wanted. It was not something he could have guessed. He had wanted to let it go. It didn't matter if it was a misunderstanding. Xiang Kaiping had nothing and Su Qingsang was already with Hu Jinyao. Her appearance couldn't change anything. However, Su Qinghui didn't expect that Xiang Kaiping would hate Su Peixian. She even went against Su Peixian for Su Qingsang. This was definitely not what Su Qinghui wanted to see. He owed Xiang Kaiping. Su Peixian was his daughter in the palm of his hand. How could he watch Xiang Kaiping make things difficult for her own daughter? Not to mention that if Li Qianxue came looking for Xiang Kaiping, he was afraid that Xiang Kaiping would hate Su Peixian even more. That was even more not what he wanted to see. He was obsessed and felt that Su Peixian was willing to give the best. No matter what, Li Qianxue should be good to Su Peixian. Xiang Kaiping should also be good to Su Peixian. That was the reason why he came looking for her in a hurry today. Others didn't know, but he knew very well that Su Qingsang was actually Li Qianxue's child. Su Peixian was Xiang Caiping's daughter. Xiang Kaiping had slapped Su Peixian because of Su Qingsang. What would Xiang Kaiping think if she found out? Su Qinghui didn't know and he didn't dare to think about it now. Things had gone out of control and he wanted to tell Xiang Kaiping the truth. He was also worried that Xiang Kaiping would not believe or accept it. Perhaps he could try to persuade Xiang Kaiping to stay away from Su Peixian and avoid conflict with her? Su Qinghui thought for a long time and finally came up with an excuse. However, he didn't expect to see a happy family in front of him the moment he arrived. Su Qingsang and Xiang Kaiping were like a real mother and daughter. The atmosphere between them was very harmonious. That was something Su Qinghui hadn't expected. He had been wondering if he should say something. Should I expose him? If he didn't say anything, Xiang Kaiping would always hate Peixian and get close to Qingsang, which was something he didn't want. However, if he really exposed the truth, would the harmony between Xiang Kaiping and Su Qingsang still exist? Most importantly, Xiang Kaiping wanted to be her daughter. If she knew that Su Qingsang wasn't her daughter, would she turn around and look for Su Peixian? Chapter 366. He had no way to punish Li Qianxue, nor could he avenge the humiliation he had suffered years ago. Su Qinghui had been in a dilemma. Xiang Kaiping wanted to kick him out, but he still hadn't figured out what to say. When her hand touched the door and she was about to push him out, Su Qinghui lost his cool and blurted out the words, "Su Qingsang is not his daughter." Xiang Kaiping stared at him, her eyes wide with shock. "What did you say?" "I said Su Qingsang isn't your daughter. You don't have to be so nice to her. You even hurt Peixian for her sake. You know Peixian is your real daughter." Before Su Qinghui could finish his sentence, Xiang Kaiping interrupted him. "Su Qinghui." Xiang Kaiping hadn't expected that after more than 20 years, the gentleman in her memory would become like this. "You don't even want to acknowledge your daughter so that I won't cause trouble for Su Peixian?" "Kaiping, what are you talking about? Why didn't I acknowledge my daughter?" "You still deny it? Tell me, is Qingsang your daughter?" "Yes." "Really? How do you know she is?" Xiang Kaiping had never been so sharp. Her body was trembling and her voice was almost cracking. The man she had loved, the only man she had ever loved. It wasn't just love. They had grown up together almost like siblings. However, this man was such a man. In order to prevent her from hurting his precious daughter, in order to prevent his daughter from making things difficult for his legal wife's daughter, he could even find such a shameless reason? "Get out." Xiang Kaiping was furious. She opened the door and was about to push Su Qinghui out. "Kaiping, did you hear that, Qingsang?" Before Su Qinghui could finish his sentence, he saw Su Qingsang and Hu Jinyao coming out of the elevator. He froze for a moment. The words were stuck in his throat and he couldn't say them out. Xiang Kaiping was about to lose her temper when she saw Su Qingsang come back. She lowered her eyes and didn't want to say a word. "Mom." What was going on? Why did she hear Su Qinghui mention her name? Su Qingsang looked back and forth between Su Qinghui and Xiang Kaiping. She blinked and turned to look at Hu Jinyao. Hu Jinyao shook his head at her without saying a word. However, his hand secretly squeezed her palm. Su Qingsang wanted to laugh, although it was not the right time. Looking at her parents, she cleared her throat. "Mom, it's cold outside. Let's go in." The weather in Lin City was getting colder. Now that it was New Year's Day, it was indeed very cold to stay outside. "Are you cold? Come in." Xiang Kaiping was anxious. She ignored Su Qinghui and walked past him to grab Su Qingsang's hand. Su Qingsang's hand was held by Xiang Kaiping. Contrary to Su Qingsang's cold hand, Xiang Kaiping's hand was very warm. "Are you cold? Why don't you wear more clothes when you go out?" "It's my fault." Hu Jinyao followed her into the room. "I should have gotten Qingsang some clothes." "Mom, I'm not a kid anymore. I said I was afraid that you would be cold." Su Qingsang pointed at herself. "Look, I'm wearing so many clothes. And you said your hands are so cold." "My hands are like this. When it's cold, my hands and feet get cold. It has nothing to do with how many clothes I wear." "That won't do. We'll find a traditional Chinese medicine doctor to take your pulse. We'll see how you can recuperate." "Mom, I'm a doctor myself. Doctors don't treat themselves. Haven't you heard of it?" Xiang Kaiping's love for her daughter increased. Chapter 367. Mom. Su Qingsang looked at the two of them with a confused look on her face. What was going on? The atmosphere was quite good when they were eating just now. "Qingsang, it's getting late. You should rest early. Take a hot shower and soak your hands and feet in hot water. Xiang Kaiping didn't respond to Su Qingsang's look. She just held her hand and smiled gently. In addition to the gentleness, there was also self-blame, guilt, and heartache. Those emotions were well concealed by Xiang Kaiping. All that could be seen was her gentleness and love at the moment. Mom. Su Qingsang was a little helpless and touched. I'm not a child anymore. Yes. You're not a child anymore. You still don't know how to take care of yourself. How could Su Qingsang know how to take care of herself? Without a biological mother by her side, having a biological father was as good as not having one. She didn't know how much she had been wronged since she was a child. Thinking of this, Xiang Kaiping was once again glad that she had come to Lin City. If she hadn't come, Su Qingsang would have suffered even more. Mom, don't worry. I'll take good care of Qingsang in the future. Hu Jinyao took the opportunity to show his sincerity. He stood next to Su Qingsang and put his big hand on her shoulder. Qingsang, don't you think so? His parents were still around and he wasn't being proper again. Su Qingsang glared at him and moved her shoulder to the side without a trace. Hu Jinyao was very strong. How could Su Qingsang avoid him? He could tell that Su Qinghui was probably up to no good this time. Otherwise, Xiang Kaiping wouldn't look like that. He didn't know what Su Qinghui said to upset her. Maybe he could go back and check? Hu Jinyao's gaze fell on Su Qinghui, who had a somewhat complicated expression. Once again, a very strange feeling emerged in his heart. Xiang Kaiping looked at the loving and harmonious couple and was happier than if she had eaten honey. You guys go and rest. I'll watch some TV. She was going to talk to Su Qinghui alone. Hu Jinyao and Su Qingsang looked at each other and turned to say goodbye to Su Qinghui together before returning to the room. All of Su Qinghui's impulses just now disappeared when he saw Su Qingsang come back. A little impatience would spoil great plans. He couldn't say. Since her children were no longer around, Xiang Kaiping didn't want to pretend anymore. Su Qinghui, why don't you tell me that Qingsang is not my daughter? Whose daughter was that? Who is my daughter? Su Qinghui looked at the sharp expression on Xiang Kaiping's face. She was a gentle woman who used to have no opinions of her own. Because she had become a mother, she had also started to become sharper. She would show such a sharp side to him. Can't say it? Xiang Kaiping smiled coldly and nodded. Say it. You don't want me to make things difficult for Su Peixian, right? Yes. Su Qinghui closed his eyes. His heart was filled with bitterness, but his face was calm. Kaiping Peixian is a good girl. Next time, can you not make things difficult for her? If there was such a thing as the pain of having one's heart gouged out and the agony of having one's heart dug out, Xiang Kaiping felt that it would be the same as now. Su Qinghui Peixian is a good girl. Wasn't Qingsang the same? I can't make things difficult for Su Peixian, but your wife and daughter can make things difficult for my Qingsang, right? Su Qinghui opened his eyes and looked at her helplessly. I didn't mean that. Chapter 368. Su Qinghui clenched his fists tightly by his side. He looked at Xiang Kaiping and finally nodded. Hey, I'll go. He was free and easy, but his footsteps were very heavy when he turned around. One wrong step led to many wrong steps. Su Qinghui had never doubted himself like this before. He had never denied himself like this before. His shoulders were full of helplessness. Xiang Kaiping saw it, but she didn't feel the slightest sympathy. Xiang Kaiping was even more determined than Su Qinghui. No one can bully my daughter. She would protect Su Qingsang well. She wouldn't let Su Qinghui or the Li family hurt her again. It was her fault in the past. It was her mistake that caused the current situation. From now on she would protect Su Qingsang well. Su Qingsang entered the door and touched her nose. She wanted to eavesdrop on what her parents would say, but she didn't feel like it. She couldn't help but stick her ear to the door the moment the door was closed. Hu Jinyao smiled and was about to open the door a little. Su Qingsang suddenly became nervous. Don't. It would be bad if they found out. If you want to hear it, just do it openly. In fact, he was a little curious about what Su Qinghui and Xiang Kaiping had to say. Shoo. Su Qingsang made a gesture and pressed her ear to the door. Hu Jinyao wanted to laugh, so he imitated her and pressed his ear to listen. However, the sound insulation of the door was too good. He couldn't hear what was said outside, but he saw Su Qingsang's beautiful neck and small earlobes. Along the back of her collar he could see the smooth snow-white nape. That color made Hu Jinyao's eyes dim. He couldn't care less about eavesdropping on the conversation between his parents-in-law. He picked up Su Qingsang. Su Qingsang's body was suddenly suspended in the air and she was startled. Hu Jinyao. What was he doing? She hadn't finished listening. Although she didn't hear anything at all. Wife. Hu Jinyao carried her to the bedside in a few steps. You went to Japan for a week, right? How? Su Qingsang almost understood what he was going to do next. Only 6 days. Yes. That's a week. Hu Jinyao laid her body flat on the bed and lay down himself. Honey, we haven't had an in-depth conversation for a week. Su Qingsang looked into his eyes and suddenly felt hot. Me what? Hu Jinyao kissed the tip of her nose as he spoke. Don't you know that communication is essential for a good relationship between a husband and wife? Especially deep communication. Now let's exchange some pointers. Hu Jinyao. Call me husband. Hu Jinyao. Call me husband. Hubby. I'm here. Honey, I'm here. Say it again, hubby. The following conversation was indeed very in-depth. Su Qingsang was still a little tired when she got up in the morning. It was true that absence made the heart grow fonder, but it was also true that her physical strength could not keep up. Hu Jinyao got up early, but it was raining today, so he couldn't go outside to do morning exercises. He saw Su Qingsang as soon as she woke up. He pecked her on the cheek. Morning. Early? It was getting late. Su Qingsang just wanted to get up, but her waist softened and she lay back down. Hu Jinyao looked at her and wanted to laugh, but he didn't dare to really laugh. This wife was good at everything, but she was thin-skinned and had poor physical strength. Chapter 369. Su Qingsang pushed his hand away. How could she be fine? Stay away from me. I'll be fine. That won't do. When he met her coquettish eyes, he smiled, revealing his white teeth. Su Qingsang gritted her teeth. What are you laughing at? White teeth. Honey, I like to be near you. Hu Jinyao didn't forget to take advantage of her as he spoke. He wrapped his arms around her waist and said, Don't you know? Oof, I want to get up. She still had to work today. He had rested for so long. When Su Qingsang got off the bed, she suddenly paused and said, By the way, I'll tell the director today. What? In fact, I mentioned it to the director before. I said that you wanted me to go to Rong City to develop my career. The director did not agree at the time. I'll talk to her again today and see what the director thinks. If it's possible, let's go to Rong City. He stood up and walked to Su Qingsang. Do you want to go to Rong City with me, or do you want to avoid your father and your mother? Both. Although Su Qingsang was interrupted by Hu Jinyao yesterday, she didn't miss the sharp look on Xiang Saiping's face. You saw how my mother was. She couldn't communicate with my dad at all, let alone get along with him calmly. Although it was impossible for the two of them to be together now, if my dad kept pestering me like this, my mom would definitely feel very troubled. Since that's the case, why don't we separate them? At that time they won't be able to see each other anymore, and I believe my mother's emotions will stabilize. Hu Jinyao nodded and said, Then you should ask your director. I'll talk to Cheng Xianyun and see which hospital you want to go to. There's no rush. We can talk about it when I get to Rong City. But I think we might have to take care of things in Lin City. All right. Whatever you say. Su Qingsang glanced at Hu Jinyao. She finally realized that he was almost unconditionally obedient to her when it came to these small matters. Looking at Hu Jinyao's handsome face, she leaned over and kissed him on the cheek. Hu Jinyao, thank you. Hu Jinyao held her waist and kissed her lips again when she moved away. And deepened the kiss. It wasn't until Su Qingsang's legs turned to jelly and she leaned into his arms that he finally let her go. This is the gift I want. Su Qingsang glared at him and quickly hid in the bathroom. The two of them walked out of the room hand in hand. Xiang Kaiping had already prepared breakfast. Recently she was getting more and more familiar with this kind of thing. Morning. Morning, Mom. Good morning. Xiang Saiping's gaze fell on their hands, which were held together. The more she looked at this pair of children, the more satisfied she was. Qingsang, how was your rest yesterday? Do you want to take another day off? No need. Su Qingsang picked up the bowl of porridge in front of her. I'm not that weak. Besides, I've already taken a few days off. Your health is more important. Xiang Kaiping was worried about her daughter. No matter what, if you're really tired, stay at home and rest. Anyway, even if Qing Sang didn't work, the money she had earned in the past was enough for her to use for the rest of her life. You'll spoil me rotten. My daughter. I want to spoil her. After yesterday, Xiang Kaiping had thought it through. Su Qinghui, if you like to spoil your own daughter, then go ahead. If you want to be good to your own daughter, then go ahead. Chapter 370. Hu Jinyao supported himself with one hand as he watched the interaction between the mother and daughter. The strange thought he had yesterday completely disappeared. He felt that this result was pretty good. Be it Su Qinghui or Li Qianxue. With him around, those people wouldn't be able to do anything. He sincerely hoped that the happy scene between the mother and daughter could continue. After Su Qingsang and Su Qingsang left, Xiang Kaiping cleared the dishes and cleaned the house. Sister Lu used to be the one who did all these things, but she couldn't stay idle and liked to do it herself. After cleaning, she knitted a sweater for a while. Her movements weren't slow, and the lower half of her body could be seen through the sweater. As she knitted, she thought about what to cook for her daughter and son-in-law today. Qingsang was a doctor. He worked very hard every day. In the evening, Hu Jinyao went to bed again. It wasn't that she was eavesdropping. She was a little upset after being provoked by Su Qinghui yesterday, but she was afraid that her daughter would overthink it. He thought he was going to talk to Su Qingsang, but he overheard it. Xiang Kaiping suddenly felt uncomfortable and walked back to her room without stopping. However, he was worried that Su Qingsang's body wouldn't be able to take it. The more she thought about it, the more restless she became. She put down her sweater, picked up her bag and went out. As soon as she stepped into the elevator, another elevator opened. Li Qianxue walked out from inside. His expression did not look too good. Her daughter, Su Peixian, was her flesh and blood. She and Su Qinghui's married life could be said to be as respectful as ice. After Su Peixian was born, Su Qinghui loved his daughter dearly even though he didn't like her. Not only him but old Master Li and she also cherished this daughter of theirs. But now her daughter had been slapped in the face. The one who hit her was one of the people she hated the most. No, perhaps he was the only one. Li Qianxue thought of Xiang Kaiping from many years ago. She was delicate and pale just like Sister Lin. She didn't like this kind of woman. She liked Su Qinghui and fell in love with him. Li Qianxue closed her eyes and gestured for her assistant to knock on the door. The assistant knocked on the door but there was no response. Li Qianxue furrowed her brows tightly. He had never been to this place before. She knew that Su Qinghui had given her this house when Su Qingsang was 18 years old. She didn't care about the small amount of money needed to buy a house. But now the house that Su Qinghui had bought had been given to Su Qingsang, and now that woman was living in it. What was this? Keeping a mistress in his house? Jim Li, there's no one. Li Qianxue looked at the tightly shut door with an unfriendly expression. She thought for a moment and said, "Let's go." Did Xiang Kaiping know that he was coming? Is that why he went into hiding? Xiang Kaiping could hide but Su Qingsang couldn't. Su Peixian entered Su Qinghui's office early in the morning. Su Qinghui didn't come home yesterday. She couldn't find him in the morning. Dad. When Su Peixian saw Su Qinghui, she rushed up to him without hesitation. Why didn't you go home yesterday? Old Master Li had asked Su Qinghui what he had been up to this morning. Li Qianxue's expression was a little ugly at the time, but she still said that there was a project in the company, and Su Qinghui had been very busy recently. Did you go to see Su Qingsang yesterday? Did you see her mother? Did you stand up for me? The series of questions gave Su Qinghui a headache. He didn't go home yesterday but rested in the office lounge for the night. Chapter 371. Even when he was asleep he kept dreaming. In the dream he regretted that he should not have swapped the two children in the first place. Then he dreamed that many years later Xiang Kaiping found out that he had swapped the children. Not only was she unhappy but she also blamed him. Finally he dreamed of Li Qianxue. The moment she found out that he had swapped her daughter, she almost went crazy. Then he woke up from the nightmare of Li Qianxue stabbing him with a knife. After waking up, the overly realistic dream made him have no doubt that one day he would really encounter that kind of thing, that he would really go to that day. Dad. Seeing that Su Qinghui was distracted again, Su Peijian was very displeased. Say something. Did you go to the mother and daughter to get even with them? Peijian. Don't be stubborn. With that dream, Su Qinghui had decided that he must not let anyone know that the two children had been swapped. Right now he wanted Su Peijian to stop causing trouble for Su Qingsang. Our company has been working with Hu Jinyao recently. It's better for you not to cause trouble for Su Qingsang. Dad. Su Peijian couldn't believe what she heard. What do you mean? Are you saying that in your heart the company's business is more important than me? That's not what I mean. Su Qinghui rubbed between his eyebrows. He spoiled this daughter too much. Unknowingly he spoiled her a little too much. Looking at her and then at Su Qingsang, he couldn't imagine how Xiang Kaiping would react when she found out about the truth. Peijian. Su Qinghui's voice had a rare trace of fatigue. In my heart you are the most important. Whether it is the company or Su Qingsang, they can't compare to you. I don't want you to go to Su Qingsang because I don't think it is necessary. Secondly, Su Qingsang is now under Hu Jinyao's protection. If we go against the Hu family we will not be able to gain any advantage. Are we just going to let it go? Su Peijian couldn't take it. Of course not. Su Qinghui got up and walked to Su Peijian. He held her shoulders and said, Peijian, believe me. In this world it is not about who gets the advantage first who wins. The one who laughs last will be the winner. Su Peijian saw the seriousness in her father's eyes and suddenly nodded. Dad, do you mean that you've already thought of a way to deal with Su Qingsang and her mother? Of course. Su Qinghui skipped over the words mother and daughter, and finally stopped regretting his choice. Peijian believes in Dad. You are the one who wins in the end. Okay. Su Peijian was relieved to hear that. I believe you, Dad. Since Su Qinghui had said so, she would wait and see Su Qingsang suffer. As soon as Su Qingsang entered the department, she gave out the gifts for the director and the doctors. In the past few months of her marriage, she would go to Rome City one day and Japan the next. The number of times he took leave was more than the previous few years. In fact, he was quite embarrassed. Fortunately, Zhang Qiubai was a very good person. Qin Xiaoyu was also a very good person. The two chief physicians were nice people, and so were the other doctors and nurses in the department. Su Qingsang got busy after the gift was sent out. At the end of the year there were more people getting married and giving birth. Su Qingsang, who had rested for a few days, immediately threw herself into work and was very busy. During the time she was in Japan, the obstetrics and gynecology department received several pregnant women who were about to give birth. 2 of them had other diseases that required special attention. Chapter 372. It was already late winter in Lin City and the temperature was slightly low. There were either patients or doctors and nurses hurrying past the corridor. Compared to them, Li Qianxue was the most eye-catching one. Li Qianxue was wearing a white woolen coat, her long hair was tied up behind her head, her makeup was exquisite, and her facial features were bright. She looked to be in her early 30s. Even if she walked quickly, her steps were very elegant. In the past, Li Qianxue was the model lady of the entire upper class of Lin City. Because no matter when he saw her, no matter where he saw her, she always had an elegant look on her face. However, at this time her expression was not very good. No, it should be said that she did not want to be good. While Su Qingsang was thinking about whether she could avoid it, Li Qianxue had already seen her. Not only did she see her, but she also walked straight toward her. Su Qingsang sighed in her heart. If it was a blessing, it would not be a curse. If it was a curse, she could not avoid it. Li Qianxue was self-conscious, and it was unlikely that she would cause trouble here. Su Qingsang thought for a moment and took a few steps forward to greet her. Auntie? Are you here for me? Li Qianxue stood still and glanced at Su Qingsang. She was wearing a white coat and had a face that looked very similar to Su Qinghui's when he was young. She felt uncomfortable when she saw this face. It was quite uncomfortable. Her daughter did not look like Su Qinghui, nor did she look like herself. However, Xiang Caiping's daughter looked very much like Su Qinghui. Li Qianxue's hand that was holding the bag slightly tightened, and her expression was a little ugly. Auntie. After all, Su Qingsang had lived in the Li family for so many years, so she naturally knew that Li Qianxue did not like her. Come in and talk. Her office was just above and she didn't have her own office. She was with other doctors. However, they should not be in the office at this time. Bringing Li Qianxue back to her office, Su Qingsang looked at the environment in front of her. Sit down. Su Qingsang watched Li Qianxue enter the door, but let the assistant guard the door. She sighed in her heart. Auntie, do you want some water? After asking, she felt a little silly. Li Qianxue did not come to drink water today. No, I'm not here to drink water. Li Qianxue's face was cold and her tone was also cold. Su Qingsang was a little embarrassed. She seemed to have just remembered that Li Qianxue never drank pure water from outside. What can I do for you, auntie? Su Qingsang didn't dare to joke with Li Qianxue. That was courting death. Li Qianxue pursed her lips even tighter when she saw Su Qingsang's uncomfortable expression. To be honest, she really didn't like Su Qingsang. However, no matter how much she disliked her, she would not go so far as to make things difficult for her. After all, she did not want to involve the next generation in the matters of the previous generation. However, the older Su Qingsang got, the more she looked like Su Qinghui, which made her hate her even more. Thinking of this, Li Qianxue's expression became more and more unpleasant. I heard that you went to Japan some time ago? The corners of Su Qingsang's mouth twitched. Yes. Su Qingsang nodded slightly, her voice strangely lacking in confidence. You went with your mother? Li Qianxue took a step forward. Yes. Su Qingsang wasn't afraid of Li Qianxue. But maybe it was because the past few years had left a deep impression on her that she was a little afraid of her. You met Peixian in Japan? Li Qianxue took another step forward. Yes. Su Peixian must have told Li Qianxue about being beaten. Chapter 373. Su Qingsang actually felt a little emotional. Su Qinghui and Li Qianxue stood up for Su Peixian when she was beaten up. Su Qingsang had never experienced the feeling of being loved by her parents before. Now that she had experienced it, she felt that Su Peixian was really lucky. Your mother hit Peixian? Li Qianxue continued to take a step forward. She was already standing in front of Su Qingsang. The distance between the two of them was less than 20 centimeters. Su Qingsang felt a little uncomfortable and took a step back. Your mother hit Peixian? When Li Qianxue said this, her gaze was already quite sharp. Auntie, you can't blame my mother for this. The situation at that time. I'm asking you, am I right? Li Qianxue wasn't here to listen to an explanation today. She just wanted an answer. Did your mother make a move? Su Qingsang couldn't refute that. She nodded and said, yes. Li Qianxue's face darkened. She raised her hand and slapped Su Qingsang's face. Su Qingsang didn't expect Li Qianxue, who had always been arrogant, to hit her. She didn't want to be hit. Just as her hand was about to fall, he stretched out his hand to block it without thinking. Li Qianxue didn't expect Su Qingsang to dare to block it. The anger on her face grew. Su Qingsang, auntie. Su Qingsang was a little scared. Like Hu Jinyao, Li Qianxue had been in a high position for a long time, so she had an imposing manner. Moreover, she was already a little afraid of her. He wasn't confident that he would be able to stop her hand from hitting him. Auntie, as the saying goes, a mother's debts must be paid by her daughter. I can't stop you from hitting me today to avenge Su Peixian. But if you hit me today and I go to work with a palm print, I'm afraid it won't be good. What does it have to do with me? Li Qianxue tried to pull her hand out, but Su Qingsang held her back tightly. Li Qianxue lived like a princess. When she went out, she didn't have to carry heavy things. She even had someone carry her bag for her. However, Su Qingsang was a doctor. When she was short of hands, she had to lift the bed, help to send the patients, and perform consecutive operations. How could Li Qianxue defeat her? Su Qingsang, let go of me. Li Qianxue was determined to teach Su Qingsang a lesson today. If her mother dared to lay a hand on Su Peixian, then don't blame her for doing the same to Su Qingsang. Auntie, if I let go, would I let you hit me? Su Qingsang sighed in her heart. Auntie, please be reasonable. Your mother is the one who did it? You want me to reason with you? Li Qianxue sneered. Su Qingsang, how shameless do you think you are? Auntie. Su Qingsang took a deep breath and retorted, I'm not shameless enough. He didn't think much of it. In fact, I can understand why you want to beat me up for Su Peixian. However, Hu Jinyao was very protective. If you slap me today, I don't care. I'll take it. But I can't guarantee that he will do anything. Are you threatening me? It was rare for Li Qianxue to be angered by her. Her tone lost its usual calmness. It doesn't count. I'm just telling you that it won't do you any good. Su Qingsang saw that Li Qianxue was angry. She let go of her hand, took a step back and stood further away from Li Qianxue. Auntie, Su Peixian only said that my mother hit her. I don't think she said anything nasty, right? Li Qianxue's face was cold. Her hand was hurting from Su Qingsang's grip just now. She moved her wrist and felt that she couldn't take it anymore. Su Peixian scolded me and it was very nasty. At that time my mother was also anxious to stand up for me, so she hit me. Just like you did today. My mother hit Su Peixian and you rushed over to stand up for her. What if you hit me? If I was hit by you, would my mother be anxious to find trouble with Su Peixian again and stand up for me? You? Li Qianxue's face became more and more ugly. Auntie, both sides are responsible for this matter. Why don't we each take a step back? You don't care about my mother hitting Su Peixian. I will also hide this matter from my mother. What do you think? What right do you have to negotiate with me? I really don't have the right to negotiate with you. Su Qingsang nodded and her voice was much softer than before. I just want to tell you a fact. What you do is not good for you. If you vent your anger on me, my mother will look for you or Su Peixian. You can indeed not be afraid. But in this way, it will increase the chances of my mother appearing in front of my father. I don't think this is what you want to see, right? Li Qianxue was stunned for a moment. She thought of Xiang Caiping's delicate face when she was young, but it always made Su Qinghui feel pity for her. The anger in her heart turned into hatred. Of course, she didn't want to see Su Qinghui looking for Xiang Caiping again and again. She had been unable to compete with that woman for so many years. Even when Su Qinghui was in front of her, his heart was still thinking about that woman. Now that that woman was back, Su Qinghui's soul would probably be taken away by Xiang Caiping. Thinking of this, she became more and more angry and hateful. Looking at Su Qingsang's face, she felt that she was getting more and more annoyed. Su Qingsang naturally noticed the change in her expression. She knew that something was wrong, but she could only think of a way to continue comforting her. Auntie. In fact, I don't have a grudge against you and neither does my mother. It wasn't my mother who brought me back to the Su family but my father. If you want to hate me, you should look for my father, not my mother. Seeing that Li Qianxue's expression didn't change, Su Qingsang continued. Auntie, what do you think about this? You can forget about this matter and never mention it again. I promise. I will make sure that my mother will never appear in front of my father again. What can you guarantee? It wasn't that Li Qianxue didn't believe Su Qingsang, but she didn't believe Su Qinghui. If he knew that that woman was back, she was afraid that he wouldn't be able to sit still. Don't think that she didn't know where Su Qinghui went yesterday. Didn't he go to look for Xiang Caiping? He didn't come back for a whole night. Who knew what he did outside? Did he do anything wrong? And that Xiang Caiping hadn't seen Su Qinghui for so long. Now that she saw him again, wasn't it dry wood or fire? Every time Li Qianxue thought of this, she felt that her gums began to hurt. What can you guarantee? What right do you have to guarantee? Su Qingsang sighed. It was a decision that she had made before, but at this moment, it only strengthened her determination. Auntie, you should know that Hu Jinyao is from Rong City. In fact, my mother has been living in Rong City before. In fact, Hu Jinyao has asked me more than once to go to Rong City with him to develop my career, but I was not very willing at that time. That you're tuning in to the Dreamy Chapters YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.